Chapter 481 Stately Jezebel. As the essence-nurturing forest fell to chaos, the roughly 200 nature spirit tribesmen and women away from the battlefield cowered within their dens, trembling under the earth-shaking concentration of might-sending tremors throughout heaven and earth. Many wondered if this day would end in their demise, if justice erred to the point their innocent selves could never live in serenity. And as fright settled in, they clutched one another's arms, seeking mutual support and reliance in the hands and faces they knew best. Not that it helped. Carrying Ravana's head on top of a pike, Heidi led her silent blades to the nature spirits' hideouts, sniffing them out with her seer's vision before allowing her blades to do the cleaning. By the time they felt the need to scream, the men became corpses and the ladies captives. In other hideouts, Selene and the Valkyrie did the same. Only Verena didn't partake in the grand harvesting. Not that she didn't want to, but from above, a vast pressure descended, keeping her pinned and unable to join the fray. The essence-nurturing forest's high custodian hovered in the sky with dreadful life laws erupting from his flawless form. With his hands crossed beneath his back and his eyes gleaming with an austere, dignified look, he gave the impression of a harsh but wizened elder hiding a fair countenance beneath a harsh exterior. And as far as the nature spirits were concerned, this was indeed true. But to outsiders, he had only one thing to offer: spite. For their greed and selfish purposes, they ransacked his home, despoiled his people, ruined his birthplace, and showed no remorse for it. 4 billions of years he remained within this land, enduring, enduring, and enduring, all without any chance to retaliate. Fortunately, Heaven was finally taking pity on their plight and giving them the opportunity to fight back. At the High Custodian's back, the 140 nature spirits at the cosmic god rank or above stood with their hatred-filled eyes locking the lone Verena below. But even before this mighty battalion of hatred, she remained undaunted. Wait, no, Verena clutched her arms and shivered under the pressure. Oh, my profane god, help! 140 shameless defilers have gathered to oppress a helpless woman. Someone please come to my aid. Husband, where are you? Verena sobbed while screaming for help, causing even the silent blades in the shadows to not know whether to laugh or to cry. And seeing the oppressor branding them as criminals, the spirit gods felt new waves of rage and indignation swelling their hearts. Cut this senseless display. Today, your only way out is surrender. Obediently come with me, and I won't make things difficult for you. Resist, and even those 30 assassins hiding in the shadows won't be of use to you. The High Custodian spat. Clearly, he'd long since located the 30 silent blades. Although they could cheat the suppressed ancestral Deva gods, there was no way their concealment could fool the eyes of a full-fledged legendary god backed by life-wielding. Sigh. Verena sighed and stopped her act to raise unfazed eyes toward the High Custodian and his forces. I'm curious, of all the targets available, why did you choose me? Verena inquired with a curiosity-laced tone. Clearly, the High Custodian wished to use the apparition of those new fruits as decoy to seize key members of Conrad's faction. He didn't doubt the lure of the primogen fruits would be enough to captivate their leader, thereby giving him room for maneuver. But within the 4 available choices, why would a shrewd man possibly choose her? Before that inquiry, the High Custodian's lips curled into a smile. Because you are the least troublesome, he replied, causing Verena's eyes to widen in disbelief. I am? Why did I not know? She wondered out loud, causing black lines to flash on more than one forehead. But undisturbed, the High Custodian carried on. First choice, the lass. Though she appears to be the weakest of the lot, she's armed with mind-blowing wealth that makes one shiver in fright. Worse, besides her assassins, a non-negligible expert hides in the shadows, ready to strike should the situation get out of hand. Therefore, she's the worst choice. The High Custodian reasoned, pulling an approving nod from Verena. Second choice, the bimbo. She should have been the right middle. Alas, she wields a strange mirror set that lowers her foe's cultivation to her level. That mirror could even affect a half-step legendary god. At the same level, We're lamb for the slaughter. I am not risking my people's neck in such a suicidal assault." The High Custodian followed, again causing Verena to nod in approval. Third, the Valkyrie. That creature's strength is deep and unfathomable, shifting and incomprehensible, boasting abilities I can't begin to understand. Understanding your foe is the first step of all victories. I am not one to dive into a conflict I have no understanding of. Worse, she wields a strange armor that makes all her abilities rise exponentially, a terrible foe. That leaves you, the Fate Goddess. Your forte lies in your fate laws, but I happen to have the means to counter them. Before me, you have no hope. Satisf-? As the High Custodian's words reached the end, he felt his heart rate rise at an alarming speed while his heart threatened to explode within his chest. His eyes widened in disbelief, and alarmed, he clutched his chest, releasing his life wielding to suppress the incomprehensible condition. A step too late. Pooh. The High Custodian spurted a large mouthful of blood, staggered, and tumbled toward the ground, leaving his 140 subordinates dumbfounded. But Verena gave them no time to indulge in stupor. Before the custodian could reach the ground, she shot toward him, driving her hand into a frontal knife strike aiming at his brain. But how could a legendary god fall so easily? Suppressing the horrendous pain, the High Custodian whirled sideways, letting the blow move past him before raising an emerald barrier to repel further assault. The 140 gods kicked into gear, descending upon Verena in an organized battle formation to buy their leader enough time to mend his wound. But as they reached a 5 feet distance from her, Verena's lips curled into a smile, and dark purple energies burst from her form while a crimson Valkyrie armor appeared to cover her form. 2 blood-colored longswords appeared in Verena's hands, and as the pressure of her late-stage boundless sea devil cultivation skyrocketed, she stepped into the sky, whirlwind her blade in a macabre dance that harvested the heads of the more than 100 cosmic gods in one go. A sea of spirit god blood stained the air before raining onto the ground, and by the time the first droplet of blood hit the timberland, Verena stood high in the sky with 6 pairs of crimson wings sprouting from her back, and a horned helmet heightening the devilish glint of her eyes. Despicable, despicable harlot. The High Custodian cursed. Veins bulged from his temple and his eyes went bloodshot as he realized himself played like a rancid fool. But little did he expect that when his echoed, "Ha ha 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 ha," Verena would burst into laughter. Flattery will get you nowhere. As my husband would say, in his court of Jezebels, none can challenge me in deviousness. Chapter 482, Samsara Breaking Wheel. The High Custodian didn't lie. He indeed had the means to counter Fate Seers. However, that required preparation. Never did he expect that before they raised their swords, Verena already was altering his fate standard, using the time he so foolishly gave her to alter his constitution and induce cultivation deviation. Back when he observed her, Verena always conducted herself with the stately stance of a lofty woman. Only now did he realize how much of a sinister creature she really was. But unlike him, in the midst of battle, Verena never wasted time. 35 ancestral gods and 5 half-step legendary gods remained to assist the High Custodian. How could she give them the chance to outnumber her? Tao armament, fate-weaving tablet, Verena uttered, causing a pearl-white stone tablet to appear before her. The mark of her fate embodiment, the fate-weaving tablet. Stretching out her hand, she summoned the epic writing quill whose devil force unfurled alongside the boundless fate laws that didn't lose out to her fate-weaving tablet. Holding those 2 items, deciding the fate of ancestral gods was simplicity incarnate. Verena's hand blurred as she inscribed the spirit gods' fates on the fate-weaving tablet. Instantly, their souls collapsed, and they dropped onto the ground. Verena considered having them self-destruct to ruin the High Custodian. Alas, she needed corpses to offer her husband. What a pity. The High Custodian watched helpless as his great guardians and tribal elders followed the guardians into the grave, tumbling onto the ground like discarded dolls. But though the scene daggered his heart, he didn't let grief cloud his judgment, and flashed his hands in incantation gestures. Samsara breaking wheel. A pearl-white wheel appeared above the High Custodian, releasing hundreds of white chains that coiled around him, obliterating the concentration of fate laws, ruining him from the inside before shooting toward Verena. Her eyes widened in disbelief. The seventh ancient secret? Verena realized as her eyes expanded in astonishment. The seventh ancient secret was the Brahma's core secret. In the three realms, only they possessed a copy, and only those heaven-warding temple deities at the ancestral god rank or above had the right to cultivate it. How could it possibly appear in the hands of a nature spirit? I am done for, Verena confessed while diving toward the ground, dancing in the air to avoid the samsara chains that heralded her demise. Of the top 7 ancient secret, the samsara breaking will rank 7th for 2 reasons. First, it was the easiest to cultivate. Second, it didn't possess any offensive ability. Its only skill was undoing fate and truth laws. As long as the user's cultivation surpassed that of his foe, even an embodiment couldn't escape. For that reason, it was the nightmare of all seers' vision cultivators. As long as those chains trapped her, with the High Custodian's 4th layer samsara breaking wheel, Verena didn't doubt her strongest cards would instantly become as useful as a cow's fart. Alas, no matter where she went, as if driven by her vast fate laws, the chains stood firm on her tracks, relentlessly chasing her throughout the essence nurturing forests, sky, and ground. Boundless Devil Sea, Verena exclaimed, causing dark purple mist to erupt from her form and expand in the atmosphere, becoming a vast dark purple sea whose suffocating devil energies withered all trees in the vicinity. Law Revolution Creed. Verena vanished and reappeared above the boundless devil sea's center with multicolor rays rippling from her eyes and form. In those rays, hundreds of law wielding from base laws to higher laws, united with the devil sea to fuel Verena's sword with sky-rending might. With a 360-degree spin, she cleft the air, slicing heaven's space and releasing a rainbow-colored half-moon that hurtled toward the High Custodian, shattering his samsara-breaking chains before slicing him in 2 perfect halves. Alas, before Verena could rejoice, the halves joined right back, leaving no wound behind. The High Custodian expanded, becoming a 1-kilometer-tall giant of uncanny emerald skin. There is no scenario where you survive this, he stated before vanishing to reappear above Verena. His samsara breaking will kicked into gear, suppressing Verena alongside her fate laws and leaving her at his mercy. The High Custodian's dozens of meters-wide palm dropped onto Verena, trapping her within his grasp. Initially, I planned to hold you hostage to discuss terms with that leader of yours. However, the blood of my 140 kinsmen lies in your hands. I can't spare you. Meanwhile, within the essence nurturing forest core zone, Conrad stood at the center of the 3 emerald light pillars, watching the primogen fruits they held mature at breakneck speed. At the same time, 7 forces crossed the essence nurturing forest sky to land above him. A ball of searing flames, an irresistible hurricane, a translucent river, swirling sand, and more. The 7 divine lords had arrived to fight for the awakening loot. Those primogens may not care for the fruits, but the chance to become a life embodiment was a whole other matter. Moreover, they had to ensure the fruits didn't fall into the hands of their enemies and act before the cardinal lords made their moves. Time was of the essence. But little did they expect that by the time they arrived, another man was already occupying the site, facing them with his daunting back as he stood in between the 3 life pillars. Translucent, wind-blown white hairs cascaded at his back, and alongside his black robe, concealed most of his snow-white skin. But though they could feel no energy from that lone man, even before he turned, the divine lords felt the blades of apprehension stabbing their hearts. The man turned, revealing a figure of Empyrean perfection, constrained only by those icy blue eyes that made even their battle-hardened hearts palpitate. "Who are you?" "Bomi," the divine earth lady asked with a voice betraying her chaotic mind state. "Wrong question. The right one is, what am I going to do to you?" Chapter 483, Forbidden Locks. Conrad's soothing, yet chilling voice echoed within the ears of the 7 divine lords, making them all wonder what kind of formidable existence stood before them. But then, his cultivation base erupted, and though they couldn't feel god force, the pressure only matched that of a mid-stage ancestral god. Instantly, a shroud of confusion invaded the divine lord's eyes. How could the man opposing them all possibly stand at such a low level? Is he using some kind of secret art to mask his true cultivation? Bomi wondered. But the seer's vision users within the lot soon rendered a different verdict. 258 years old. Although the origin of his cultivation is a mystery, it is indeed comparable to a mid-stage ancestral god. Although such aptitude makes even Tauroth look like a waste, he's nothing to be afraid of. Now the question is, who is his backer? Garuda, the divine wind lord, appraised through his seer's vision. Seer's vision users could determine the precise age of any expert, unless of course said expert prevented the probe with mightier truth laws. Since Conrad didn't bother doing so, Garuda and the other seer's vision users could effortlessly see through his actual age. But matching the result with the cultivation he displayed didn't provide them with any relief. On the scene, who didn't take hundreds of thousands of years to become an ancestor, now someone the age of their youngest descendants appeared with that kind of cultivation, as if intent on shaming their achievements. He must be related to that Thonian primogen, most likely one of his juniors. Only an existence of that level could possibly produce such a descendant. Varuna, the divine sea lord, hypothesized as he recalled Nahul's startling cultivation growth, and soon, all were of the same thought. But now, none of that mattered. Time was of the essence. If they didn't snatch the primogen fruits and secure the inheritance before the cardinal lords arrived, best-case scenario they returned empty-handed. Worst-case scenario, they surrendered their lives. Primogens dying from internal clashes was nothing new. At the beginning of times, there were 15 of them. Why did only 11 remain? They could waste no more time. We must act with haste, destroy the primogen fruits, and secure the life embodiment inheritance. If one of us can obtain it, then in the future, our divine alliance needs not fear the cardinal lords. Agni, the divine flame lord, declared and stepped forward. With every one of his steps, the essence nurturing forest's temperature rose to absurd heights. His mane of flaming hair erratically blue, gleaming alongside his eyes in a reddish glow. Boy, this eminence doesn't care about where you hail from. Since you choose to stand in this eminence's way, surrender your life. Agni bellowed while the world-shaking might of a mid-stage legendary god erupted from his form alongside his fire embodiment laws. Red flames surged from Agni's pores to soar into the sky, turning him into a gigantic ball of flames that discolored the clouds and charred all the trees in the distance, searing the heaven and searing the earth. Fortunately, the nature spirits had already been collected. Otherwise, they'd have turned into ashes and dust. Of course, in the center of the inheritance ground, the situation was different. Ancestral glory, searing world. Agni stretched out his hands, holding nothing back as he combined the full might of his laws with his ancestral glory. Vanishing within the vast expanse of flames, Agni unfurled his flame tsunami on Conrad, leaving him absolutely no room to escape as from above, below, left and right, flames whose tiniest sparks could end worlds shot toward him. But before this move that made so many demons shiver in fright, Conrad remained undisturbed. Better, his lips curved into a smile. Even when the flaming sea swallowed him whole, that smile remained unchanged. Set ablaze by Agni's flames, the inheritance ground burned. But none doubted that a force breeding a life embodiment would survive the blow. The boy, however, that was another story. Or so they thought. Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. A guffaw erupted from within the flames, startling all divine lords who couldn't comprehend the meaning of this sorcery. Agni, more than them, stared slack-jawed at the center of his flames. Flames that shrunk in a breath of time to become a tiny fireball laying in the hand of that dissolute but wholly unharmed youth. With a casual toss, Conrad threw the fireball at Varuna, the divine sea lord, and by the time he snapped out of his topper, the fireball had expanded into a sea of flames with 1,000 times the might of Agni's blow. Alarmed, Varuna attempted to resist, but was shocked to find himself unable to move an inch of his body. The magnified searing world swallowed him whole, quite literally trapping the divine Sea Lord in a living hell. Aara Weorgerg. Varuna howled as he burned into nothingness, and by the time the flame dispersed, only his heart remained. All he was, all he had, his strength and blood origin, flew toward Conrad to merge with his Thonian heart. When I embarked on the road of cultivation, my country worshipped a deity known as the Divine Flame Lord. I always thought that if one day we met, it would be an epic battle worth writing songs about. What a letdown. Conrad chortled before stretching his hand toward Agni. Vast suction force trapped the Divine Flame Lord, and unable to resist, he flew into Conrad's grasp. Clutching his neck, Conrad hoisted him up, siphoning his primogen blood and strength while sweeping the remaining 5 with his icy blue gaze. This eminence? What a joke. Before I, the profane prince, who dares adopt such a condescending tone. You deserve to die. Conrad chided as his siphoning of Agni's soul, blood, and strength came to an end. Crack. With a casual move, Conrad wrenched Agni's neck, then tossed him toward the ground. But this merely was the beginning. His form blurred, becoming 5 identical versions that crossed the void to land before the 5 divine lords. Alarmed, the divine lords all released their strongest elemental attacks, but before they collided with the 5 Conrad, they were startled to see 10 black locks appear around his form, rippling with energies that made their ancient hearts panic. Forbidden locks. Those are the legendary forbidden locks. Run away. Garuda howled before turning into a gigantic gold and green eagle to fly towards safety. Alas, he'd just completed his transformation that Conrad's hand rammed into his chest to gouge his heart and rupture his soul. The other divine lords didn't have it better, all seeing their attacks swallowed by the locks before returning to their peers with 1,000 times the might. Boom asterisk boom boom boom. Blasted in the sky, the divine lords attempted to use the momentum to escape their foe. A futile attempt. The Conrads blocked their path, giving them no way out. The divine lightning lord had turned into a thunderbolt to escape this tribulation, but was startled to see a figure land on his shoulders and suppress him mid-air. Absolutely no class. Conrad chided while seizing the lightning lord's head in his hands and yanking it off his neck. The divine blade lord turned into a sword and shot toward the ground for succor, but a kick from Conrad's shattered blade, true body and soul, destroying him in one move. The divine wood lord suffered a similar fate with Conrad grabbing him by the shoulder before tearing him in 2 grotesque halves. Now, of the original 7 divine lords, only Bumi, the divine earth lady, remained. Conrad's afterimages vanished, leaving behind the true body who now stood before Bumi, holding her suppressed in the air as he seized her chin. Beautiful, Terra is waiting for you. Conrad began, then stabbed Bumi's forehead with his right index. But I must kill you first. No hard feelings. I swear I will make it up to you. Bumi's eyes widened in disbelief. Life left her body, but before she dropped onto the ground, Conrad sent her body into his infinite void space. At that time, Daksha and Durga crossed heaven's sky to land before this scene of gore. Brihaspati arrived not long afterward. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the dinner party. With the appetizer out of the way, let the revelry begin. Chapter 484. I shall reward you with a glorious death. When they left their domains with blazing ire and the gong of vengeance ringing in their minds, never did the cardinal lords expect that the gored corpses of their fellow primogens awaited them. Less than a week after Nahal's return and the Sea Dream City's commotion, Heaven only had 4 primogens left. But as his eyes swept Conrad's black locks, Daksha feared the number would soon shrink to 0. Forbidden locks truly exist, he sighed in dismay, and when their gazes swept the locks, even the bellicose Durga and the demonized Brihaspati floundered. According to common knowledge, forbidden physique owners all held a crippling curse and couldn't cultivate. Moreover, their physiques would always be limited to the birth rank. However, legend was that the 3 forbidden physiques all held 30 locks, and breaking those locks would allow the owner to not only cultivate, but unleash the forbidden physique's true powers. By breaking the first 10 locks, at the legendary god rank, the forbidden physique owner would rarely meet rivals. But in those countless eons, no such existence appeared. Therefore, the ancients soon left the tale in the back of their minds. Little did they know that besides a tremendous quantity of energy, breaking forbidden locks required an irreplaceable ingredient: a firmament bridge. The term forbidden was coined by Regretless following his conquest of the Omniverse, for he knew that those physiques possessed an intricate connection to the firmament, a connection not even he could make use of. When all locks broke, 1 forbidden physique was comparable to a supreme, 2 to a high supreme, and 3 to the almighty supreme. Though he believed no firmament bridge owner would ever appear, Regretless wasn't willing to take chances and tempered with the firmament's energies to curse all firmament physique owners throughout the Omniverse, ensuring that none of them could ever cultivate and would possess such ghastly curses that the world would shun them. Hence, the firmament physiques became the forbidden physiques that filled countless worlds with mixtures of awe and disgust. Little did Regretless expect that the man he loathed the most would build a firmament bridge and restore them to glory. Now, as he stared at those locks rippling with a force that heralded damnation, Daksha wondered whether he should advance or retreat. But when he recalled his daughters most likely lay in that man's hands, he no longer had any hesitation. The demonized Brihaspati craved Conrad's blood. Therefore, regardless of his powers, he would fight. As for Durga, she never cowered before might and wouldn't start today. Thonian Primogen, I presume? Daksha began with magenta clouds swirling around his form. Not too harebrained. I like, but you should call me son-in-law. Otherwise, you'd break your daughters' hearts. In consideration for them, if you offer your blood origin and bow to me, I can give you a new road. Conrad replied with a wolfish grin, and when his words reverberated within the sky, veins beat on Daksha's temple. But as he prepared to snap, a voice echoed in his mind. Father, he butchered the 7 divine lords as if they were nothing but rats and chickens. You are not his match. Throughout the celestial realm, only the warden can possibly contend with him. Retreat. Rithi urged in a hurried tone, though she'd long since hypothesized that Conrad's individual strength surpassed all primogens. Never did she expect the gap to be this outrageous. Even if the 3 cardinal lords joined hands, she wouldn't bet on them. And hearing his daughters pleading, Daksha heaved a sigh of relief. At least Rithi was safe. For now, that was the most important. Even if you speak the truth, 99% of the high-ranking male devis of our sea dream temple have perished while you aside. The female's whereabouts are unknown. A brief glance shows the same thing appeared in the other cardinal sects. Why is that? I believe you can guess. Even if I want to retreat, he might not allow it. The Thonian Primogen unleashed the underworld on an entire realm and destroyed its original will. Is that level of existence the kind to act without purpose? He wanted us here, to harvest our lives. That being the case, let's fight. I have not cultivated for billions of years to perish in the hands of a junior. Daksha snarled the last parts, for both Rithi and Conrad. The former lowered her trembling face and sighed while the latter nodded in approval. Acceptable, Dao heart. I like. Good, very good. You were always my favorite. Conrad appraised with an approving nod, but as his words ended, all trace of jest vanished from his face, and when his eyes returned to the 3 cardinal lords, they shone with soul-rending killing intent and irresistible battle will. Very well, come at me with all you got. Show me what you're made of and fight for your one shot at salvation. I shall reward you with a glorious death. Conrad bellowed and stretched out his hands, causing black devil force to burst from his form alongside the multicolor light of his Law Revolution creed. At first, although the pressure of his devil energies seemed stuck at the mid-stage ancestral god level, When he released the full might of his laws and bloodline, space crackled and collapsed, creating vortexes that threw heaven's sky into chaos. Within the celestial realm, even peak-stage legendary gods couldn't create space vortexes. A boundless veil of darkness rose at Conrad's feet, carrying him upward, high above the cardinal lords, and announcing to the entirety of the celestial world that above the essence nurturing forest, a world-shaking battle was taking place. Meanwhile, the forest drank the blood of the fallen, devas, spirits and primogens alike, to complete its transformation. The fruits matured, and at the center of the three pillars, a dwarf tree appeared. But the cardinal lords couldn't care for any of this. Their eyes focused on Conrad and only him. Following an exchange of mental messages to ensure coordination, the three made their moves. Brihaspati's bloodied eyes blazed with frenzy as he stepped forward. Dark mist swirled around his form, contrasting with the blinding light erupting from his pores. Towers of Reckoning. Brihaspati raised his arms, causing 300 towers of pure light, each high of 9 kilometers, to appear and fire 300 light beams into heaven's sky. The light beams coalesced into a gargantuan light orb ready to rain holy judgment on Conrad for a lifetime of sinful deeds. The more foul karma the opponent accumulated, the stronger the towers of reckoning were. Never in Brihaspati's life did he see them display such dreadful might. When comparing the current towers to the ones Chandra faced, the difference was akin to the gap between heaven and earth. Yet, Conrad didn't even spare them a glance. Citadels of Dreams. Backing Brihaspati, Daksha unleashed his ancestral glory fueled by the might of his dream laws, while Durga armed her 4 hands with 4 mighty spears and summoned waves of darkness to contend with Conrad. Brihaspati, thank you for offering me your wife. If a next life there is, I hope we can be brothers, so that I may cuck you all over. Conrad whispered in a mental message that cleared all of Brihaspati's doubts. Eowalwarg. Die. Die, 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 die. Brihaspati howled in grief, releasing the blinding spear of judgment fueled by the extreme of his light and fate laws. The spear tore through the sky, crackling space before descending upon Conrad. Not even bothering using the forbidden locks of his might reversal physique, he stretched out his right hand, facing Brihaspati's full force with his leisurely palm. Boom. The blinding spear stopped right against Conrad's palm, not going an inch further, then collapsed in light particles. To say nothing of Brihaspati, Daksha, and Durga all couldn't believe their eyes. And as she witnessed this scene from afar, Rithi released a helpless sigh. Doomed. They were all doomed. Chapter 485, Trampling All Primogens with Irresistible Might. With this level of skills you dare demand my life? TSS, 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 presumptuous ant. Conrad chided, and his form blurred in a succession of afterimages as he barreled into Brihaspati with his right hand raised in a palm strike. The blow struck Brihaspati right in his chest. It caved in, all breath left him, and he flew backward with a massive blood spurt. Worse, devil energies snuck into his internal organs and soul, taking control of his chaotic heart to turn him into a puppet of Conrad's will. 2 black rings appeared at Conrad's back, releasing black mist that transported Brihaspati right next to him. The Cardinal Light Lord's bloodied eyes stared blankly at his former peers while the black mist filled his eyes and pores, emptying him of all he held and feeding him to Conrad through the rings. Feeling Conrad's horrible strength rising at breakneck speed, Daksha and Durga didn't hesitate. Together, they said in tandem. Daksha summoned thousands of magenta clouds that filled heaven's sky while unleashing dream laws to assail Conrad's mind. A pity that dream laws ranked high on the list of things Conrad feared the least. My devil heart is not what you can shake. Conrad dismissed the move and punched, unleashing squalls of multicolor winds that shredded Daksha's laws and lacerated his body. As he backpedaled within the air, primogen blood gushed from his bloodied form, further helping the essence nurturing forest's transformation. Face my spears. Durga bellowed and wielding her 4 spears, swirled as she hurtled toward Conrad, becoming a black whirlwind of pure darkness laws. At the same time, she anchored the space around him, preventing all retreat. Biting off more than you can chew. Your trivial space laws bear no weight on a truth embodiment such as I. Conrad chided as Durga flew at him with her spears. The first grazed his cheek, the second his neck, the third his waist, and the fourth his crotch. But effortlessly, Conrad avoided them all, bending and whirlwind without leaving his original spot. Durga moved past him, but returned by slamming the back end of her spears toward Conrad's chest. Conrad met the blow with a single palm strike that sent Durga reeling in the sky. Somersaulting, she regained her stance and flew right back at him with a flurry of spear strikes. In the blink of an eye, each of Durga's arms unleashed millions of spear strikes, thrusting and slashing at Conrad, but only meeting the air. Worse, he remained in that same spot, avoiding all the blows without stepping away from it. Impudence! Durga roared, humiliated by the ease with which Conrad evaded her blows. Rolling backward, she joined the tip of her 4 spears, while the full might of her dark laws erupted from her form. Dozens of dark vortexes appeared behind Durga, each releasing hundreds of dark spears, swords, axes, daggers, and all kinds of armaments aiming at Conrad. Dao Law, Dark Blade Rain. At Durga's command, the deluge of armaments turned into dark meteors, all shooting toward Conrad. Meanwhile, though still wounded, Daksha had regained his strength and flung 3 magenta chakrams into the air. The chakrams stopped at Conrad's right, left, and above his head, forming a magenta triangle that released a dazzling beam of celestial energies onto him. Avoiding your blows is giving face to your beauty. Do you really think it's a necessity? Foolhardy. Conrad scoffed and stretched out his arms while opening his mouth wide. Innate skill, devouring. Conrad's devouring skill merged with his might reversal physique to swallow and magnify his foe's blows 10,000-fold, then return it to them both. Durga faced Daksha's celestial beam, while Dalsha faced her blades. Unable to resist a level of might that put peak stage legendary gods in awe, the two made a hasty retreat. Alas, their speed failed to back them up, and they bore the brunt of the counterattack. Boom boom boom. Blasted by the celestial beam, Durga flew backward, with several parts of her previously unblemished skin charred by the blow which moved past her outer shell to slam her soul. Daksha had it worse. The blades tore him to shreds, turning him into a floating trunk that fled for succor. Innate skill. Extinction. Conrad stretched out his left hand, releasing an icy blue light blaze that assailed his recoiling foes. Extinction targeted life essence and physical matter. Although it couldn't slay deities, with Conrad's current bloodline strength, incapacitating them was simplicity incarnate. Durga and Daksha felt all strength leave their divine bodies, making them feel the helplessness of mortals before deities. Turning into 2 black beams, Conrad slammed into Daksha's face with his right knee, while slamming Durga into the sky with an upward kick. Aerarg. Daksha and Durga groaned in tandem while blood gushed from their broken forms. 2 Conrads now stood on the scene, and the 2 held the surviving Cardinal Lord's necks within their right palms. Brihaspati's siphoning had come to an end, and of the previously mighty fate-wielding Lord of Light, only a skeletal shell remained. With such strength and the power of a realm, why wait till now? Why lurk in the shadows? Daksha stammered, unable to comprehend why the mighty Thonian Primogen chose to hide within the shadows of the celestial realm instead of trampling all with his absolute strength. Based on his strength alone, he could hold his own with the Warden. Once he unleashed the might of his realm, who could resist him? But before Daksha's indignation-laced inquiry, Conrad sneered. Do you think my moves take you Primogen's strength into consideration? Laughable. My enemies are not of this world. Be it demons or Devis, you are merely food meant to fuel my growth and lay the foundation for the true battle. The 2 Conrads replied before hurling both Daksha and Durga toward the ground. In a deafening explosion of flying dust and debris, they cratered, But Conrad didn't stop there. Clenching his fists, he unleashed the full might of his devil rings, making them expand respectively to 1 and 3 kilometers. Black lightning stretched from the ring's corners toward their center, coalescing into orbs of massive devil energies ready to end the Cardinal Lord's struggle. But at that time, the darkened sky brightened under the appearance of celestial light that illuminated all throughout heaven. The clouds gathered, swirling around one orb of blinding light from which all throughout heaven could feel peace and serenity. It was as if hope manifested into a superior entity, as if the highest God had appeared to save all from damnation. What a bold and dreadful junior! Why not do us all a favor and vanish from this world? Heaven's herald, the warden inquired while descending before Conrad. Chapter 486 Old Enemies Gather. That the warden would make a move before the end of this show gave Conrad no surprise. After all, Heaven's future was at stake. However, so what? Today, even if the warden and the overlord joined forces, Conrad dared battle them both. As the light orb containing Heaven's strongest descended before him, Conrad arched his head back, and with his usual roguish grin peered deep into that light orb where a silver mist concealed the face of his foe. I'm afraid the 3 realms beauties can't accept such a result, but I suppose a billions of years old virgin monk can't understand their plight. Why don't I turn you into a lady to help you grasp it? Conrad leisurely replied, causing the figure within the light orb to arch an eyebrow. In its billions of years of existence, only Chandra dared make such comments in its presence, and he paid dearly for it. Was this junior so conceited as to think he could defeat the warden within heaven? But before Heaven's herald could reply, tongues hellfire filled heaven's sky, challenging the warden's radiance while the stench of brimstone permeated the atmosphere and assailed the nostrils of all below. Before those flames, before that scent, all lives throughout heaven quivered, and even the warden's presence didn't ease their surging fright. Do you need my help? A voice came from the swirling tongues of hellfire, a hoarse voice Conrad was quite familiar with, and as it echoed, the figure within the black flames lowered his eyes on him, and what he saw shocked him to the core of his soul. It's you? Hell's law enforcer, the Overlord, inquired from within the sky, while the tongues of hellfire coalesced in the figure of an old man dressed in jet-black battle armor. If not for the wrinkles, his features would be 70% similar to that of Celine's father, Marduk. Old pal, long time no see. Missed me? Conrad chortled while rising higher into the sky to stand at the same level as his new foes. With the consternation written all over his face, anyone could see that the Overlord wasn't unfamiliar with the Thonian Primogen's facial features. The fact filled the warden with puzzlement. You know him? The clouded warden inquired in a mental message that snapped the Overlord out of his torpor. How could I not? He's Tauratha's youngest son. The Overlord replied with disbelief lacing his tone. And who could blame him? Even the warden couldn't believe the words. How can this be? You're trying to tell me that Tauratha's Nephilim scion is the Thonian Primogen? Nephilim? When did he become a Nephilim? Last I checked, he clearly was a demon boy. As the higher realms leaders exchanged outdated intel, the essence nurturing forest's dwarf tree thrived on the spilled Primogen blood to expand and morph into a new entity. Feeling the change, the warden abandoned the aimless topic to return to the pressing matter. Never mind. Now, none of this matters. For the sake of heaven and hell's will, we must slay this junior and end the threat of the Thonian realm. Leave no room for mistakes and take him down at the fastest pace. The warden proclaimed and stepped forward, causing wild tremors to fill heaven and earth as the full might of the herald's cultivation erupted. Right beside his peer, the Overlord nodded in approval and stepped forward. How many eons has it been since the two of us cooperated to slay one expert? Never did I expect that the dissolute supremacy-seeking brat could come so far. A pity that his existence goes against hell's laws. Clenching his fists, the Overlord let his cultivation base explode alongside the warden's, and even before the two made a move, heaven's trillions of lives believed a world-ending calamity had descended upon them. The overlord stretched out his right hand, aiming it at Conrad while the warden's fingers bent in incantation gestures. Boy, congratulations on coming so far, but the three realms do not allow the existence of anomalies such as yourself. Since you insist on courting destruction, allow me to obliterate you with the might of an overgod. Awaken and enforce my will. Infernal dominion. The overlord bellowed, causing a 3 meters long jet-black scepter to appear in an eruption of demonic energies and land in his palm. At the same time, his skin changed, going from white to pitch black, while his body expanded, rising to 10 meters in height. 3 pairs of black wings sprouted from his back, and 3 pairs of curved, demonic horns emerged from his forehead. His scara assumed the same black, and his eyes, a flaming red that shimmered with endless infernal might. Ancestral glory, realm of eternal peace. At the same time, the scenery changed as the warden summoned the Brahma's ancestral glory. The world became an idyllic land of 33 floating islands on top of which various creatures stood in harmony. The essence nurturing forest vanished from the onlooker's sight, and in their eyes, green lush prairies replaced the chaotic world. Conrad saw himself taking turns on the floating islands, exploring the peaceful paradises while the need to surrender to peace assailed his mind, or attempted to. With a wave of his hand, he broke the spell and soared into the sky, becoming billowing black fog above which his devil rings still stood. All the negativity throughout the celestial world gathered within the rings, allowing them to expand to respectively 10 and 30 kilometers. Black lightning crackled from their shanks, snaking toward the ring's center to become a gargantuan orb of negativity. Grand Devil Trident. Boom. The orb released a black, nefarious trident of pure fell energies that tore through the sky as it barreled into the Overlord and the Warden. Heaven of the 33. Tao Law. Broken Fate Claws. The Warden and the Overlord exclaimed in succession. The 33 floating islands became celestial mountains with 32 swirling around a 33rd, the center of them all. Their celestial energies intertwined and overlapped before they soared in an organized formation toward Conrad's trident. Meanwhile, berserk fate laws erupted from the Overlord, gathering the energies released by all the broken fates across the celestial world into thousands of gray claws that shot toward Conrad, attempting to drive him into that same end. Chapter 487 Subatomic Clash, * Boom. A succession of ear-splitting explosions shook heaven's sky, tearing the ground and cities across the 13 domains asunder while even the divine and cardinal sects shook. The impact of that unprecedented blast forced the Overlord and the Warden to recoil from one step. Conrad, however, stood still with his gargantuan trident hovering above the black fog surrounding him. With his arms folded beneath his chest, Conrad emerged from the black fog, floating above it while his derisive gaze swept his two foes. If you were true overgods, you could indeed take me on. But with your false overgod strength, that is but a pipe's dream, Conrad stated, speaking words that only heightened both of his opponents' disbelief. In that one move, they realized the battle was far from going to their advantage. While they'd already unleashed lineage weapon and ancestral glory, the foe still relied on cultivation skills, laws, and bloodline strength. The implications were evident. Although they still held many cards, as long as Conrad tapped in the underworld strength, destruction awaited them both. But why is he not? The Overlord and the Warden wondered with surging suspicion. In that instant, enlightenment flashed in their eyes, and they both came to the same conclusion. He cannot. Be it due to his unwillingness to trigger heaven's will or other considerations, they believed Conrad dared not use his realm's strength. And indeed, they were right. Unleashing the power of the Thonian realm wouldn't just trigger heaven's will, but alert his true enemies. The full might of the Thonian realm was just equal to an early-stage primordial god. Unless he swallowed heaven and hell's will, or regained the god executing immortal sword, drawing in the likes of blood netherwood, at best, trigger a battle in which both sides perished. That being the case, there is room for maneuver. Overlord and Warden exchanged one glance of tacit understanding before stretching out their hands. Overlord's might, Heaven warding will. They bellowed in perfect sync. Vibration waves and horrendous infernal forces ruined the sky and ground as the supreme Overlord Physique's true might erupted from the form of its original owner. At the same time, dazzling silver light strands emerged from the Warden, swirling around that shrouded frame none could peer into while the great Warden Physique kicked into gear. The light strands coalesced into a silver giant that held the Warden within its core, providing absolute defense while the Overlord's destructive might still rose. But even as his foe's strength grew at a startling speed, Conrad's smile remained unchanged. Better, it grew brighter still. Clenching his fists, he let the full might of his bloodline, devil energies, and laws erupt in one go. In a burst of nefarious forces, two armaments appeared to hover above Conrad's hands. His natal devil artifact, a dark purple warhammer, and an icy blue broadsword, his Omnislayer. Opening his hands, Conrad clenched the weapons, letting their dreadful forces explode alongside his unconstrained might. But even before the foes made their move, Heaven showed signs of collapse, unable to endure further abuse. Seeing this, the Warden made the only suitable decision. Fight on a subatomic level, the Warden exclaimed, pulling an approving nod from the Overlord. Starting with the Overgod level, a deity's strength was simply too much for what any world, no matter how mighty, could endure. Heaven and hell were no exception. However, those at the Overgod level possessed the ability to fight on a subatomic level that left their surrounding wholly unaffected. No matter how dreadful the ability they used, to the onlooker, it would be as if they vanished from the world. And so they did. In tandem, the Warden and the Overlord pulled Conrad into a subatomic clash, making the three of them vanish from the sight and senses of all celestial deities. But as peace returned to Heaven, the battle only rose in intensity. Meanwhile, the onlookers shivered in fright. Surya, who from his primal sun sect witnessed this astonishing battle, quivered no end. What is the meaning of this? How could he possibly be this strong? Surya stammered, unable to believe what his eyes showed him. And recalling how he prepared for vengeance, the sun god couldn't help but feel himself laughable. What vengeance? It would be great if he didn't get minced into pieces. Having finished the forest's cleanup, Heidi and the Valkyrie stood alongside their silent blades to witness the clash. Eararg, the class, the brilliance. Dad, I love you. Heidi swooned in full fangirl mode, causing the Valkyrie to not know if she should nod in approval or rebuke this one-of-a-kind daughter of her husband, Lord. When the High Custodian first trapped Verena within his grasp and attempted to destroy her, he quickly realized that absolute immortality was hers. Without a primal law embodiment level, there was no way for him to take her life. Therefore, he just kept her suppressed and watched the clash unfold. Little did he expect that the following events would shake the very core of his soul. That strong? Holy tarnation. How do we fight? Even if the forest's transformation ends, we're not qualified to fill the gaps of his teeth. He realized in a mixture of fright and outrage. And before that display of sheer terror, Verena chortled. Ha, asinine creature. Who do you think you're dealing with? Can the god sovereign of a realm not even have this level of might? A pity that you didn't offer your women of your own volition. Otherwise, he might have spared you. The words rang in the High Custodian's massive ears like a grating racket, and his terror-stricken face contorted into a frown. I still have you. So long as I do, there is a chance for salvation. He retorted while tightening his pressure around Verena's frame. But little did he expect that the more his palm compressed her, the brighter her smile became. Do you believe fate is immutable? She asked in an amiable tone contrasting with the situation. We are the architects of our destiny. How could fate be immutable? I deny such a notion. The High Custodian replied with his frown unchanged. Hearing this, Verena nodded in approval. 1/10. So long as I write it, fate is immutable, for I have seen through all its variations, transcended its laws, and become the architect. Verena replied, and closed her eyes. As if to echo her words, her hair fluttered as the gray lines of fate swirled around her. The gray became pearl white, and the uncertain, certain. Verena opened her eyes, and they now shone in a kaleidoscope of all the fate variations existing and inexisting within the High Custodian's fate standard. Crack. The samsara breaking wheel collapsed, and from the sky, a dazzling white ray descended to slam Verena. Driven by a force he couldn't resist, the High Custodian released Verena from his grasp and shrunk back to his original size. Thank you for the trial. I needed one last push. Verena bowed in thanks, then snapped her fingers, causing the High Custodian to ram his hand into his chest, gouge out his heart, and destroy his soul. But even as he perished, he felt no regret. No, the move echoed in his mind as the natural, righteous, and only viable decision. As if from birth, he was destined to offer her his heart. Ignoring the now tumbling High Custodian's corpse, Verena spun to face the invisible scene of Conrad clashing with heaven and hell's rulers. Throughout the celestial realm, only she could see this subatomic fight, and even as the battle raged, she could already see the end. Having achieved fate transcendence, supremes, and fate transcendent experts aside, there was no one able to escape her sight. Of course, Conrad's Devil Bridge was the sole exception. Chapter 488 Invincible Across the Three Realms. Though the various celestial deities could no longer witness the ongoing battle, its intensity only soared to new heights. Flying on top of his devil trident, wielding a warhammer in one hand and a broadsword in another, Conrad broke into a macabre dance, whirling his nefarious weapons at the two false overgods. The Overlord met the natal devil artifact with his infernal dominion, while the Warden withstood the Omnislayer with his heaven-warding will. Bang clang bang. Booming and ringing sounds intertwined in the subatomic space as the three clashed at a level the three realms had never seen before, exchanging millions of moves in every heartbeat. Ha ha ha, boy, I like your style. The Overlord praised before bending his infernal dominion in a horizontal slope. Absolute war sense. Truth and life laws erupted alongside war laws as the fourth layer of the absolute war sense kicked into gear, magnifying the Overlord's strength 10,000-fold. But this merely was the beginning. Awakening war legions. The Overlord bellowed, releasing the absolute war sense's strongest ability, and causing the ground, dust, debris, the air, everything visible and invisible to turn into war machines. Wind beasts, golems, and treants rose in legions, while even the Warden felt a dreadful concentration of war forces enhance all abilities at its disposal. Indeed, it's been a while since I've had such a worthy opponent. What a pity that you stand against heaven's will. Mount Meru. As the Warden activated the sixth ancient secret, a galaxy-dwarfing mountain appeared behind its back. The northern side of that mountain was of pure gold, the southern of lapis lazuli, the eastern of crystal, and the western of ruby. Around that mountain, the sun and moon hovered, and below, a cosmic sea rose. The Warden vanished, reappearing on top of that mountain to sit cross-legged and propel it toward Conrad. Though his might reversal physique's 10 forbidden locks could repel most legendary gods' blows, those false overgods were a whole other matter. The Warden on the left, the Overlord on the right. Both hurtled at Conrad in a battle frenzy he met with matching vigor. Transcendent Death Gate. Conrad crossed his warhammers, causing the symbol of his death transcendence, a pitch-black gate, to appear at his back. The gate opened its doors, releasing a Conrad-made underworld, endless dark yellow rivers that unfurled on his foes, obliterated the Mount Meru and war beasts in one go. Boom. The mountain burst in millions of particles, and like a meteor, the Warden flew backward. Not better off, the Overlord hurtled back, and as the two regained their stances, for the first time since the beginning of times, they felt their insides riddled with organ failures, and their life essence and soul weaken as irresistible death settled within. We have no other recourse. Do it. I shall cover you. The overlord snarled while his left fingers bent in incantation gestures. As the fingers moved, Conrad could feel the overlord's cultivation base burn at its brightest. This was his final move. Over God decree. The overlord slammed his left hand against the empty air, causing a dimly lit parchment, condensing the entirety of his cultivation base to appear and hover before his weakening form. On that parchment, Conrad could see the many flaws that marked it as an incomplete over God decree. But even that incomplete force could sentence all across the three realm to destruction. All except the two on the scene, of course. Golden light burst from the decree, channeling the energies of all atoms across 10,000 kilometers in one lethal strike. Conrad's transcendent death gate rushed to meet the challenge, its dark yellow rivers calling the souls of millions of deceased to empower it all and clash with that divine decree. Warg. The overlord roared as he burned his very life force to sustain the clash. Alas, while he remained stuck in life force burning, Conrad burned his myriad world immortal blood. Boom. Star. Instantly, the death gates might overwhelm the overlord's best efforts. The decree was torn to shreds, and the aftermath obliterated Hell's number one deity's armor, charring his pitch-black skin as he tumbled toward the ground. After refining all that primogen blood, Conrad's strength had risen to absurd heights. On this day, even those two top deities couldn't oppose him, but since they couldn't, others would. The warden finished his incantation and raised flaming hands toward the sky to summon the strongest force at Heaven's Herald's disposal. Heaven's wrath. Gore, gore, gore. As the warden bellowed, divine radiance filled the sky alongside mesmerizing celestial clouds that grumbled to announce a deluge of tribulation lightning. But this was not lightning meant to test one cultivator. No, it was an avatar of extinction, the very blow of heavens while using the warden as proxy. Millions of white thunderbolts descended from above to slam Conrad where he stood. But at that time, the essence-nurturing forest transformation ended, with the dwarf tree maturing to become a 9-kilometer-tall trant. Alongside it, the primogen fruits had fully ripened. Feeling this, as he faced heaven's wrath, Conrad guffawed. Ha 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 ha. Having pushed me to this stage, you can take pride in yourselves. However, it all ends now. Innate skill. Auspicious clouds. Conrad roared, and around his body, hundreds of rainbow-colored clouds appeared, swirling in ordered spins while golden light burst from his form. The auspicious clouds isolated the domain, separating the three from heaven's reach while unleashing their suppression on both the overlord and the warden. Instantly, the two found themselves unable to gather their strength. Worse, it plummeted at breakneck speed. It was as if the entirety of their laws and cultivation had vanished in one go. For indeed, before Conrad's current auspicious clouds, primal law embodiment aside, all was invalid. He'd finally caught up to celestial slaughter in the might of that innate skill. How can this possibly be? We are quasi-over-gods. The overlord stammered, unable to believe his eyes, to believe a skill able to erase his life, truth and fate wielding existed. How was this feasible? To say nothing of false overgods. Even if you were a primordial deity, before my auspicious clouds, without primal law embodiment, you are nothing more than an ant. Conrad retorted, vanished to reappear above the overlord, and trampled his face with a vicious kick, shattering his skull and sending him tumbling toward the ground. There, he cratered. Defeated. I've been defeated. Pooh. Battered and broken, the overlord spurted a massive gush of blood and passed out. Without delay, Conrad vanished, appeared before the warden, curved his right hand into a claw strike and struck the herald's chest. Bang! But as the irresistible strike tore through the invalid warden's chest, shattered bones and let blood erupt, Conrad's face contorted into a frown, and as if to answer his stupor, the warden's shroud dispersed, revealing Hi-Thio. Before the warden's shroud collapsed, An ear-splitting shriek resounded within the celestial world as the Essence Treant rose to flee a battle it knew it couldn't win. Without delay, Conrad yanked his hand free of the warden's chest and turned into a black meteor to rush after the Treant and Primogen fruits. The treat had not even taken 3 steps that Conrad blasted his way through its trunk, reducing its new life to a regal nothing before snatching the fruits that unrighteously belonged to him. Opening his mouth, Conrad swallowed the fruits one after the other, letting his bloodline strength break through new limits and rise to an unprecedented peak. Chapter 489, Quasi-Firmament Bloodline. If before, bloodline strength was one of Conrad's mightiest foundations, as he refined the energy within the 3 Primogen fruits, it undoubtedly became his strongest card. Though the breakthrough had yet to stabilize, and the energies still ran wild within his Thonian devil heart, Conrad didn't doubt that even without his auspicious clouds, he could handle both the Overlord and the Warden in less than 5 moves. As for his auspicious clouds, they could now reduce even primal law embodiment strength by 50%. But as elation welled up within his chest, Conrad felt his rising bloodline strength hit an invisible wall, preventing him from reaching his full potential. His eyes contorted into a frown, but little did he know that as he hit a bloodline bottleneck in a distant dimension, his rise triggered an unexpected reaction. Within the Omniverse number 1 world, in one of the firmament's most honorable grounds, a towering, multicolored tree glittered in rainbow light while uncanny vibrations audible only to a few echoed from its trunk. Regretless wife and dragon warden's sword enemy, Blood Nether, opened her crimson eyes to, from a distance, peer into the tree's changes. And she wasn't the only one. Within their cultivation paradises, Cloud and Moon also awoke to observe the tree's changes. And were it not for their peculiar state, Night and Regretless would have done the same. Though Night showed signs of awakening, Regretless' condition only seemed to be getting worse. But in that instant, it didn't matter. As the 3 primordial deities' eyes peered into the tree, they came to the same conclusion. The firmament tree resonates. A quasi-firmament bloodline is born. A new candidate to the firmament's throne has risen, and so long as they breathe, we can no longer have access to the firmament's resources. The firmament was not merely the pinnacle of cultivation worlds, but a legacy whose master could rule the Omniverse throughout eternity. Though Regretless House occupied the firmament and enjoyed its unparalleled resources, they weren't its true master. Only a supreme with a firmament bloodline, a firmament bridge, and a firmament physique could stand on the firmament's throne and rule all throughout eternity. Regretless wasn't that person. Who was it? Who stood on the threshold of unlocking a firmament bloodline? Throughout the Omniverse, who possessed such skills? As puzzlement swirled within their ancient eyes, one name appeared within the 3's minds. In tandem, the 3 rose, following the firmament tree's vibrations to locate the source of the resonance. Their god senses crossed the Omniverse innumerable worlds to land on the realm hiding the source of that resonance. The celestial realm? Indeed, it is him. First, he built a firmament bridge. Now he stands on the threshold of unlocking a firmament bloodline. Who knows, perhaps he already has a firmament physique. Blood Nether whispered while her eyes narrowed at the celestial realm. Although the Devil Bridge prevented her from spying on Conrad, throughout the 3 realms, who other than him could achieve that feat? And thinking of his incessant rise, the flames of fury welled up within her chest. I said it before. Regretless, you are muddled. I have not endured all this pain, and supported you to your throne to see my father's slayer rule the Omniverse. Blood Nether bellowed and with one step, emerged from her cultivation paradise to land in the firmament sky, dressed in her crimson battle armor that bore a striking resemblance to the new Valkyrie armor model Verena donned. The original Valkyrie armors were designed based on Blood Nether's cloth. Naturally, resemblances were inevitable. And now that Conrad gave them the same crimson shade, wings aside, they were virtually the same. Without further ado, Blood Nether turned into a ball of crimson flames and like a meteor, crossed countless verses to dive into the 3 realms. Meanwhile, Cloud and Moon exchanged mental messages. "What are you going to do?" Cloud inquired in a tone that didn't conceal his amusement at this relatively perverse situation. "Right back at you, elder brother. What do you plan to do?" Moon leisurely replied, causing Cloud to shake his head with a hint of awkwardness. Between those two, only one can live. Be it due to his status as Dragon Warden, or his rising qualifications for the firmament's throne, Regretless will never spare him. After all, who would willingly surrender the title of Omniarch to a young upstart? To Regretless, Conrad's threat is now greater than celestial slaughters. When he awakes, the outcome needs not be discussed. In the meantime, Cloud analyzed before lying on his back. "I will sleep and dream of the omniverse clouds. These tedious matters your lot excels at wholly displease me. Do not count on my assistance." As if to back his words, Cloud shut his eyes close. But now, it was Moon's turn to shake her head. If closing the eyes was enough to avoid tribulations, the cultivation road wouldn't be this bloody. Even if you do not wish to meddle, circumstances beyond your control will force you to take a stand. Moon replied and stood up. Blood-red lines swirled around her form as she stepped out of her cultivation paradise to stand within the firmament's sky. Ha ha ha, having cultivated to this level, yet still unable to control the course of our destinies. Isn't that laughable? Cloud chortled with his eyes still closed, and as those words echoed in her mind, Moon nodded in approval. It is indeed laughable. However, isn't the whole cultivation path a sham? So what if you're transcendent? So what if you're supreme? None can truly rule destiny. Even a high supreme such as Regretless remains trapped by his demons, to say nothing of lesser individuals. Perhaps true supremacy is in itself a paradox. Moon replied before leaving the firmament behind to hurtle at the celestial realm. Meanwhile, within the celestial realm, the world stood in awe, quivering under the Thonian Primogen's dumbfounding display of might. Deities fell on their knees, and even from within his cultivation chambers, Surya dropped onto his rear, trembling in a mixture of fright and disbelief. The combined strength of the Overlord and the Warden, crushed by a single cultivator? How can this be? Who can save us? Surya stammered, for indeed, heaven, no, the entirety of the higher realms were in dire need of saving. The Thonian Primogen's strength stood without rival. None could prevent him from repeating the events of 200 years ago and unleash the underworld to devour heaven and hell's will. All cultivators and deities throughout the celestial realm now dreaded that same thing. Alas, there was nothing they could do to placate those fears. But as if to answer their prayers, while Conrad stabilized his bloodline breakthrough, heaven's sky turned bright red, with a crimson star appearing in its midst and dropping onto the celestial world. Seeing it, Conrad's eyes narrowed in puzzlement. Oh, much earlier than expected. Chapter 490 Eternal Pawn. Though the crimson star's size encompassed the entirety of the celestial world, the controlling force at its center was but one slender woman dressed in a battle armor laced in the blood stench of her fallen enemies. From within the star, her eyes swept the celestial world, ignoring its trillions of lives to lock on one individual, Conrad. Naturally, that woman was Blood Nether, and as soon as her crimson eyes met Conrad's icy hues, they blazed with an insatiable thirst for murder. "Dragon Warden," Blood Nether whispered, emphasizing the two words as if to convince herself that her nemesis really stood before her. And though dozens of kilometers still stood between them, Conrad heard the words and the hatred shining within. His lips curled into a smile. "Sister-in-law, long time no see. Never did I expect you'd cross the omniverse in such haste to find me. What an ardent display of thirst and devotion. What? Can Regretless no longer satisfy you? I guess his ordinary rod can't get the job done, but it's fine. Since you've come for mine, have no doubt that you'll get more pleasure than your mind can endure." Conrad began with a wink, speaking words that caused the dreadful Blood Nether's eyes to flare with greater bloodlust. Canting her head to the left, Blood nether-eyed Conrad from head to toe, for an instant wondering if she got the wrong person. But then she recalled the information she had gathered and knew that impossible. Dragon Warden, in the past, you were conceited enough, but I didn't expect reincarnation to make you even worse. Good, very good. I shall enjoy crushing you. Blood Nether stated with the glint of a blood frenzy shining in her crimson eyes. In those days, wielding the god-executing immortal sword, you didn't put the world in your eyes, single-handedly marched into the Nether realm and butchered all Nether monarchs. Some may have viewed you as a selfless hero, but in my eyes, you're even worse than that despicable father of yours. As the saying goes, an imperial son shall alleviate his father's burdens. For him, you seized the supreme blade. For him, you slew all opposition, clearing the road for the Empyrean dragon race's eternal hegemony. But at least, he had the gals to admit to his true desires, while you hid beneath the lofty veil of ending strife. For that, I despise you. Though armed with the mightiest blade, you still chose to stand below one and above the rest, forgoing the opportunity to slay a tyrant and right his wrongs. For that, I despise you. But none of that can compare to your slaying of my royal father. For that, I must butcher you. Bloodnether snarled and raised her right hand. The cape covering her armor's back fluttered alongside her crimson hair as she unleashed the horrendous might of her cultivation base. In that instant, to say nothing of heaven, even in hell, deities shivered and rushed to the intersection between the higher realms to observe the source of these startling changes. Bloodnether didn't care for the three-realm zillions of lives. Obliterating them by mistake would never bear any weight on her mind. And how could it? For an existence of her caliber, the three realms were nothing but a barbaric land, incomparable to the primordial era. In a multiverse where not even one true overgod existed, what purpose did they serve? Dahlgren, Asherah, Talroth, and the brainwashed Urzel in hell watched alongside other demon primogens the gathering of that crimson force that could at any moment wipe out all lives across their realms. But while confusion and apprehension rippled in all primogens' eyes, within Tauratha's a strange glint shone. As his eyes went between Conrad and Bloodnether, confusion flickered, but soon made way for a radiant smile. Meanwhile, Conrad shook his head in disappointment. Peak stage primordial goddess, at the summit of your cultivation road and only a step away from all transcendence. Not bad. Alas, I cannot be killed. You could destroy all across the celestial and infernal realm that it would not affect me in the slightest. Conrad reminded, and as if to rile Bloodnether further, waved his hand, causing his appearance to go from the unmatched profane princes to the austere and regal dragon wardens. His hair and eyes became pure gold, while his face morphed to reflect the change. But as her eyes lay on that face, Bloodnether's veins almost ruptured from rage. Since you're so dead set on living in the past, let me help you. Bitch, who are you trying to kid? The current infernal realm is but a pale copy of the past nether realm. You netherworld scions gashed one another's throat for a yes or a no. Blood drenched the streets, with the weak serving as food for the strong in the most literal of senses. The nether monarchs were the worst of the lot. Their cruelty knew no limit, and they only watched out for their kin while oppressing all the rest. As I recall, you immortal blood spirits were particularly adept at that game. In his life, your father, the undying blood monarch, slaughtered billions, mortals, immortals, and gods alike. At best, Dragon Warden's death count was in the tens of thousands. All deities met on the battlefield. Killing your father was undoubtedly enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. I hate nothing more than hypocrites like you who scold others for the things they excel at. Pathetic creature lost in self-delusion. A true fell creature revels in its own malevolence. Conrad retorted with his hands crossed behind his back, while his lips curved into a wolfish grin. As the words echoed in her within her mind, Bloodnether's eyelids trembled. Meanwhile, Tauratha's smile grew brighter. But that is merely the beginning. If you want to avenge your old man's death, shouldn't you start with regretless? Conrad inquired in an amused tone that filled Blood Nether's eyes with confusion. What do you mean by that? She snarled as her hand trembled alongside her voice. A portion of her mind told her she didn't wish to hear Conrad's following words, but the other one over. With a theatrical sigh, Conrad shook his head, wincing as if trapped in a dilemma. I guess it's time to break the bubble. Back when Dragon Warden marched into the Nether Realm to challenge your monarchs, Moon had already left his side to return to Regretless. Naturally, she didn't forget to warn him of the god executing Immortal Sword's might. When your father rose to meet the challenge, Regretless knew he would die. But better, he was ready to stop it, but didn't. He chose to watch your father and the other monarchs rush into destruction so that he could use you to seize the immortal blood throne and unify the Nether Realm under his banner. You have always been his pawn. Conrad sighed, causing Blood Nether's heart to fall into chaos. Chapter 491, May We Meet Again. Slanderous bastard. You are speaking rubbish. Blood Nether snarled, unable to believe the words. And as if stung by her lack of faith, Conrad heaved another theatrical sigh. Am I? On the day the Nether monarchs were butchered, the Nether Realm was left without its immortal leaders and fell into chaos. The War of the Six Realms had come to an end. But in that precise instant, Regretless became enlightened, went from immortal to peak stage primordial god, transcended in 3 primal laws, and became the first Nephilim, thenceforth uniting the Nether Realm under an incomparably mightier banner. How convenient, isn't it? Apologies, but life is not a fairy tale. One doesn't go from non-deity to quasi-supreme in one day. Regretless was accumulating, waiting for the perfect moment to let his strength erupt. That moment was your father's death, and he made a brilliant use of it. I must admit that I'm impressed. Even if Dragon Warden didn't slay him, Regretless would have found a way to kill your father and frame his death on the Empyrean. From the day you brought him into your house, the undying blood monarch was doomed to destruction. Conrad sighed, inwardly praising Regretless' cunning. Dragon Warden was indeed too tender, even allowing himself to become the tribulation demon's scapegoat. What a shame to Conrad's glorious track record. Another sigh followed. Meanwhile, Blood Nether connected the dots, and her chaotic heart went wild with rage, becoming exactly as Conrad needed it to be. Lies, Arg. I will kill you. She bellowed, and within her right hand, a crimson greatsword appeared, shimmering within swirling blood flames as Blood Nether turned into a red meteor and hurtled at Conrad, who still sobbed for her sake. Of all vices, being unfilial is the worst. Of all crimes, disloyalty lords over the rest. As an official, you betrayed your monarch by bringing in the wolf that planned his demise. As a daughter, you were unfilial by wedding he who thrived on your father's corpse. You are both disloyal and unfilial. A daughter like you should just kill herself. Conrad declared in a mental message that resounded within Blood Nether's mind, while bending back to let her sword fly by his face. Spinning on 360 degrees, Conrad vanished and reappeared in the distance. Boundless Thonian energies burst from his form as he channeled the power of the Thonian realm. Beautiful fool, today I shall avenge your poor father by ridding the world of your unfilial self. Conrad chortled, and while the Thonian realm's full might erupted, resumed his true shape. The fell Thonian energies and faith power of the entire Thonian realm filled Conrad's flesh and soul, making his strength instantly rise to primordial deity level. Stretching out his hands, Conrad summoned his natal devil artifacts and Omnislayer, then let go of them, using his devil senses to wield them as flying weapons while his form again morphed. Before the alarmed eyes of the higher realms, Conrad's snow-white skin became a scaled, icy blue while his body expanded, becoming a gargantuan icy blue dragon that encompassed the entirety of heaven's sky with its unimaginable length. The dragon's black scara and golden irises glittered with endless Thonian might. 9 pairs of black horns adorned its humongous head, while 12 pairs of sky-shrouding wings sprouted from its back. In that instant, all light vanished from the celestial world, trapping all in the shadow of that terrible creature. And as they witnessed Conrad's true form, regardless of cultivation and experience, all felt their knees quiver and their fall into chaos. This was a true monster, an unprecedented monstrosity that made demons look like angels. Now, throughout the high realms, only Blood Nether could stare at Conrad's fell eyes without a hint of dread. Do you think size makes might? Laughable. Allow me to show you true power. Blood Nether scoffed, and without further ado, held the pommel of her sword within her 2 hands before bending the blade in a vertical stance. 3 gates appeared at her back, a black gate identical to Conrad's, coming alongside a translucent and emerald gate. From those gates, Conrad could feel the strongest concentration of death, truth, and life laws he'd ever witnessed in his life. Blood Nether's transcendent gates. The 3 gates opened, releasing truth, life, and death rivers that barreled into Conrad's form. With his death gate alone, Blood Nether didn't doubt the move would end his struggle. I may not be able to kill you, but suppressing you under a mountain for eternity is perfectly within my abilities. Henceforth, you shall experience life millions of times worse than death. She howled in an uncontrollable frenzy that filled Conrad with delight. As the translucent, emerald, and yellow rivers neared his form, Conrad's maw contorted in what seemed like a smile. Innate skill. Auspicious clouds. Conrad exclaimed, summoning his strongest bloodline ability. The innate skill that now made demons and deities alike cower in fright. However, when Blood Nether glanced at the multicolor clouds, her eyes shone with ridicule. Idiot. Better than anyone, you should know that auspicious clouds will never have the tiniest effect on a transcendent being. Blood Nether scoffed, and indeed she spoke true. Even if Conrad could affect law embodiments, no matter how dreadful his auspicious clouds became, they could not affect transcendent beings who defied the laws themselves. But that was never the intended plan. Activating his auspicious cloud's domain isolating ability, Conrad trapped Blood Nether and him in a dimension standing beyond the scope of the celestial realm. Although the onlookers could still see the clash, their moves no longer had any effect on heaven. Again, Conrad split the dimension, exiling Blood Nether's truth, death, and life gates alongside the rivers they unleashed, thereby forcing her to split strength to force them back to her side. Presumptuous. Do you think my sword alone can't end your struggles? Take this. Blood Nether turned into a crimson meteor and flew toward Conrad with her sword raised in a final thrust. But as she approached his gargantuan frame, she could now clearly see that horrid, draconic smile of his. May we meet again? Conrad whispered in a mental message before cracks appeared all over his body, cracks rippling with unending devil force. Asterisk bomb. Star. In a single blast of nightmarish energies, Conrad detonated, slamming Blood Nether with such a mighty explosion that she flew outside of the celestial world. Her armor burst into crimson debris, while ghastly wounds seared her transcendent flesh. But this merely was the beginning. The devil forces snuck into Blood Nether's chaotic heart to plant a devil seed within. And even as her transcendent flesh mended her wounds, the seed germinated, blossoming into a heart devil linked to Conrad's soul. Foolish lass, don't worry. After I snatch my sword back, we shall dance again. I might even teach you the tango. In the meantime, you and I are going to be quite intimate. Let me show you all your treacherous husband couldn't. Ha 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 ha. Conrad's nefarious voice boomed from every corner of Blood Nether's being, and for the first time since her arrival, her eyes widened in pure fright. Draegon Warderden. Blood Nether howled in grief while struggling to snatch back the control of her Dao heart. Negligent. She'd been far too negligent and allowed such a lethal intrusion into her heart. I prefer Profane, Prince. Conrad leisurely replied. Chapter 492, Forge a New Road. Following the star-dwarfing Thonian dragon's self-detonation and the armored entity's ejection, peace returned to the higher realms. But in that peace, endless fright lingered. Events that defied the cognition of even deities succeeded one another in a flash, leaving the remaining gods to wonder if their past visions had been too shallow. In hell, the demon primogens stared at heavens seen with gravity. In this battle, it could be said that heaven's strength dropped to an insignificant level. Of the 7 divine lords, none remained. As for the cardinal lords, they were but paper tigers. Daksha and Durga suffered such dreadful wounds that without 10,000 years of secluded cultivation, they couldn't make full recoveries. The warden wasn't much better off. As for Surya, though he remained wholly unharmed, what could he alone accomplish? Meanwhile, though hell suffered the loss of several archdukes in internal clashes, and the overlord now stood in a near-death state, all the infernal kings remained. It could be said that if a realm war broke out at this instant, hell held a 100% chance of victory. Yet, no demon could rejoice. There was no cause for celebration. Now, heaven and hell's elites finally realized they'd always been frogs trapped at the bottom of a well, blind to the vastness of the sky. Entities able to make the warden and the overlord look like ants existed, eyeing them from the shadows, ready to end them all at a whim. The Thonian Primogen was one. That armored lady was another, and those old deities didn't doubt that more lurked in faraway lands. Beyond the 3 realms, more existed, and that more mastered their life and death. Having always believed themselves at the summit of all, that knowledge was not easily digested. But while even aloof deities such as Asherah and Dahlgren felt humbled, another problem lingered in the minds of all, devas and demons alike. Is he truly dead? Rithi wondered, unable to believe that the awe-inspiring Thonian Primogen had fallen so easily. And the same words lingered in the mind of her surviving peers and predecessors. The Thonian Primogen is the master of the underworld, the supreme lord of death. Can such an existence truly perish in battle? This is fishy. Dahlgren rationalized, and wasn't the only one with such a train of thought. But as the bloodied blood nether dragged her unsteady self back to heaven's sky, no trace of the Thonian Primogen remained. It was almost as if he'd never been there to begin with. With a smile, Talroth retrieved his transmission mirror and turned heels. In that world-rending clash, none dared compare the facial similarities between Talroth and the Thonian Primogen. Their minds didn't dare dwell in that territory. Someone else, however, couldn't help but notice it. And as Talroth returned to his royal palace, a sober Malcolm awaited in the throne room, meeting him with unprecedented gravity. "Is it him?" Malcolm directly asked, though the thought seemed inconceivable, as he observed the clash from within the infernal realm. The striking resemblance between Conrad, Talroth, and he struck him immediately. Either this was one of those 1 in a billion chance of unrelated lookalikes, or they all shared similar genes. Malcolm desperately hoped for the former. Alas, Talroth chose to disappoint him. "It is indeed him. Happy? In the future, if anyone bullies you, you can go beg your little brother for help." Talroth leisurely replied before crossing the carpeted stairs to reach his purple throne and sit within. The words gave Malcolm no relief. Worse, he trembled while his face twisting in a succession of horrid grimaces. From Talroth's tone, it didn't take a genius to realize that the Southern King firmly believed Conrad to still be alive. Those were tragic news. With an abrupt spin, Malcolm turned to face Talroth, who'd already closed his eyes to fall in silent cultivation. That throne was the equivalent of a cultivation mat, and one of Talroth's most precious commodities. But seeing the leisurely look his father boasted, Malcolm felt confusion add to his apprehension. How can you remain so relaxed? The situation is horrible. In the past, we only had to worry about the likes of Dahlgren and the Overlord. But now that that monstrosity appeared, all have become inconsequential. Unless he perishes in the future, won't we all have to grovel before him? But that is only one issue. More importantly, he clearly brings with him enemies that the combined might of heaven and hell can't afford to offend. Being linked to him will undoubtedly lead us into a catastrophe. And for what? The right to kiss his boots? Malcolm snarled, unable to comprehend how the shrewd Talroth could allow things to progress in such a manner. Clearly, he'd been paying attention to Conrad's growth. When it stepped into dangerous territory, why didn't he stop him? My crown prince is well known for his filial piety. How could he have his father grovel? Also, what are you worrying about? Let's assume for 1 second that those primordial entities realize the connection. Do you think they will care for ants of your caliber? I'm not trying to bring down troop morale, but we're talking about entities that most likely look down on overgods. Perhaps to them, letting us breathe in their presence is an incommensurable glory. How could they bother with trampling you? Talroth replied without opening his eyes, causing the trembling Malcolm to flounder in indignation. Indeed, his father spoke true. Before the likes of the Thonian Primogen and that woman, even the Overlord couldn't raise any waves, to say nothing of an early-stage legendary god such as he. And having always been proud of his bloodline and cultivation talent, Malcolm couldn't endure this truth. I know what you're thinking. You were born 1 million years ago at the minor god rank, honored as the only true pureblood demon of the second generation, and after 1 million years, finally reached the legendary god rank, but are forced to accept that you're not qualified to scrub your 258 years old brother's shoes. I admit, it's a harsh blow, but look at it in a different way. If in less than 3 centuries, he can trample the Overlord and the Warden, in another 300 years, perhaps that woman won't be able to resist 10 of his moves. You will soon be a relative of the Omniverse ruler. Isn't that a good compromise? Talroth inquired with a taunting smirk. Those words were the last straw, and Malcolm snapped. Loads of horseshit. Who wants to spend eternity in the shadow of a bastard? Royal father, although the world gave you the title of Lord of Lust, in truth, you are the father of domination. All demons descending from you yearn to trample all. It's in our blood, because of you. All along, you've coveted the lordship over hell and the rest of the 3 realms. I refuse to believe that you, of all people, can accept living in the shadow of your son. Malcolm bellowed while indexing Talroth for emphasis. But little did he expect that the echo of those words would only produce a mild sigh from Talroth's lips. Alas, I am a son of hell and cannot go against its will. So long as hell's will stands, we are its puppets. Even if by some majestic miracle my strength caught up to that of those entities, hell's will could still control me. That being the case, instead of yearning for what we cannot have, we might as well forge a new road. Chapter 493 Unexpected Wrecks. The following events occurred in a flash. Seizing the Warden, Blood Nether took command of the Heaven Warding Temple and through it, of the entirety of the celestial realm. The god executing immortal sword the Warden studied also fell in her hands, almost. As she stepped toward it, as if recognizing her scent, the ancient weapon unleashed horrendous brutality, nearly shredding her to pieces. Knowing she couldn't keep it under control, Blood Nether left it in the Warden's custody and fell in the shadows, devoting all her time to fighting the havoc Conrad wrought within her heart while awaiting his next move. Meanwhile, archdemons from the Overlord's house rushed into the celestial realm to bring him back to hell, while Ruthie brought her maimed father back to the Sea Dream Temple, and Rakshasas carried Durga back to the Eternal Void sect. At the same time, heaven and hells will finally awoke, and as if in tacit understanding, released new waves of inheritances while removing the shackles of all demons and devas, thereby allowing them to reach their full potential. Not that it mattered. At this point, such assistance was far too late. Still, deities such as Talroth, Surya, and Dahlgren made the best of the opportunity, actively seeking the road to higher levels and pursuing greater strength. On that topic, to placate his second wife, Dahlgren let her surviving sisters, the disguised Yvonne, Else, and Gulistan, inherit Apep's archduchy and adopted them in his house. Little did he know that the 3 had long since turned it into their plaything, even building an underground formation that drained all the negative energies throughout the archduchy to let their cultivation rise at a startling speed. All approached increasingly closer to transcendence, while their cultivation neared the peak of the boundless sea devil realm. Breaking through was but a matter of days. In the meantime, the mangled Daksha lay within his chambers with a low-spirited Rithi by his side. Till now, she'd yet to reveal that the Rudra Daksha allowed to take part in the contest was none other than the Thonian Primogen. Perhaps she feared her father wouldn't be able to take the blow, or she knew the knowledge would do him no good. In any case, regardless of the reason, Rithi kept her mouth shut. Aarg. Daksha groaned in pain. With his legendary god cultivation, he should have been able to heal himself in a heartbeat. What a pity that Conrad's Thonian energies and devil force wreaked havoc within his body and suppressed his regeneration abilities. In the current circumstances, without external help, Daksha would need at least 1,000 years to grow back his limbs, and more to dispel the lingering side effects. Yet, as he raised his trembling eyes at Rithi, this wasn't what troubled him the most. "Girl, you are in danger," Daksha stammered as his maimed shell quivered on top of the bed. And when those words left her father's lips, Rithi's face contorted into a frown. At first, she wondered why such words could possibly come from him. Clearly, he was the one standing at the gate between life and death. But even before Daksha spoke further, Rithi's astute mind swirled, analyzing all possibilities to come up with a reasonable answer. The reasonable answer came, and her eyes widened in disbelief. Our four cardinal sects went in with about the same manpower, each with about 250 devis at the high god rank or above. The Primal Sun sect possesses more deities than the rest. Therefore, only they didn't fully exhaust their forces above the high god rank. Still, it can be said that all four sects crippled themselves for no gain. Of those 1,000 Deva gods, only I remain. Even the nature spirits weren't spared. Rithi realized in a stupor. Not 2 or 3 survivors, only she remained. Why did she remain when even the likes of Mahava and Ravana lost their lives within the essence-nurturing forest? Why didn't she vanish alongside the rest? Anyone that pondered this question would realize it had nothing to do with her abilities. The Thonian Primogen was far too strong. Who he wished to kill couldn't survive. Who he wished to snatch could not evade. That being the case, there was only one reasonable explanation. Rithi turncoats. While most deities couldn't give her any trouble, if the warden or that new entity came to that conclusion, at best, Rithi's life was in jeopardy. At worst, the Sea Dream Temple faced destruction. Surya was clever. Although he didn't send the majority of his direct relatives, the team was led by his brother and right-hand man, Mahava. Now that he is in deep mourning, no one can doubt his motives. I, however, have nothing to defend myself. I've been played. Rithi realized, and while Daksha's teeth clattered in an effort to think of a solution, she stood up and rushed toward the chamber's exit. In a flash, the Devi crossed Daksha's temple to return to hers and wasn't startled to see that within her chambers, a man of Empyrean looks leisurely lay, shamelessly occupying her bed with his head resting on his hand. "Beautiful, welcome back. Shouldn't you thank me for warming your bed?" Conrad greeted with a wolfish grin while the fuming Rithi barreled into the room. As her eyes met his icy hues, for an instant Rithi stopped, and her mind ebbed between an odd mixture of relief and frustration. That flicker of hesitation vanished, and she strode toward that shameless devil in hurried steps. "Dastardly scoundrel, you framed me!" Rithi snarled in indignation. Never would she believe that this wasn't part of one of Conrad's depraved plans. And of course, she was right. But when facing her inquisition, Conrad clutched his chest as if stabbed by the words. "Oh, you're hurting me. Of course, I framed you. How else could I have you rush to me with such haste? Good thing that you're clever. I was wondering how long I'd have to wait." Conrad replied with a theatrical spin of his head, then with several taps on the sheets, motioned for Rithi to sit on the bed. For another instant, she stopped, blinking in disbelief as her eyes went up and down Conrad's frame. How can a man possibly be this shameless? She couldn't help but ask. Little did she expect Conrad's next words to be. "Flattering me already? I like." Shameless is my second name. The first is Conrad, and the third, Profane Prince. Take your pick. Conrad countered while still motioning for Rethie to sit, and dumbfounded, she walked with glazed eyes toward the bed and sat beside him. What do you want? Rethie seriously asked. The matter had progressed into dreadful lands, and there was no more time for jests. If no remedy arose, her only road ahead was to commit suicide before the warden or that entity made a move. Only then could she ensure the Sea Dream Temple's safety. Aware of the lady's plights, Conrad didn't beat around the bush. Make me a Sea Dream Temple elder. I need that status for my next play. Do it, and I will ensure yours and the Sea Dream Temple's safety. Conrad seriously replied. Chapter 494 with No Way Out Part 1. An odd request, Rethie thought while her enchanting eyes narrowed at Conrad's relaxed frame. Although the status of Sea Dream Elder would have driven innumerable Devis insane from greed, in the eyes of an entity at Conrad's level, it was nothing worth mentioning. To say nothing of elders, even the Temple Lord couldn't survive one of his blows. What larceny did he plan that he needed that status? Perhaps he merely wished to hide in plain sight? As her mind raced in swirling thoughts, Rethie's magenta eyes trailed Conrad's enrapturing figure, at first trying to find answers in his eyes, but soon losing herself in their riveting power. How dreadful, Rethie remarked while breaking free from the spell and avoiding further eye contact to prevent self-immolation. Although thanks to your cleanup, my father and I aside, all those that knew Rudra took place in the Essence Nurturing Forest contest either died or disappeared, there is no legitimate reason for me to promote a peak stage high god to elder. To outsiders, regardless of bloodline growth, at best, you could immediately rise to cosmic god. Going from peak stage high god to ancestral god overnight is unheard of and would raise far too many suspicions. That's the first issue. Still avoiding Conrad's icy hues, Rethie crossed her legs, letting her back face him as she stressed the problematic points. Second, my father may be mangled, but his mind remains sharp. Even if he were a harebrained donkey, Rudra's reappearance would let him connect the dots. At that time, you'd either have to silence him or make him unable to act on that knowledge. Knowing you, neither seem like acceptable options. You've already kidnapped my 22 sisters and made corpses out of 99% of the Sea Dream Temple's males above the high god rank. Needless to say, the thought of my father following them to the grave doesn't excite me. Please have mercy on us. Though straightforward in her response, Rethie's voice didn't betray any emotions. Quite obviously, the events didn't bear any weight on her. You don't seem particularly affected by the losses. Conrad probed with his lips curved in a renewed smirk. At the echo of the words, Rethie shook her head. There is no reason to be. The life plates of my sisters remain undamaged, meaning that they are still alive. And judging by how much Nahal profited from you, their future doesn't look bleak. As for the rest, as the Sea Dream Temple's great elder, I regret the loss of all those talents. But as an individual, I couldn't care less. The males are either my sister's dual cultivation partners or distant relatives I see once in 10,000 years. Why should I care? The cultivation world is a brutal place. The weak dying in the hands of the strong, an ancestral rule. When you fall, blame your own ineptitude instead of cursing others. My father is the one truly bothering me. Please provide a plan that doesn't put what remains of his life at risk. Rethie directly replied. She didn't doubt that without that armored woman's intervention, her father would have followed in Brihaspati's footsteps to become another one of Conrad's meals. Clearly, to him, primogen blood was a delicacy that triggered a meteoric strength rise. I've already reached my cap. Daksha's blood no longer serves many purposes. Fine, this is what we'll do. I will rewrite his memories so that he never sent Rudra into the Essence Nurturing Forest to begin with. As for your other concern, that's simple. Your sect has just suffered crippling damage. Your very foundation is in jeopardy and hundreds of positions lay empty. In such circumstances, attempting to go by with your 7 elders alone is lunacy. It is time to hire talents and rebuild the ruined foundation. You'll lower all cultivation requirements by 1 level. Nihility gods can now become deacons, high gods can become protectors, and cosmic gods can become elders. At the same time, you shall open your doors to all gifted deities and talents, bless them with devahood in the case of humans, and let them fill the positions they can while waiting for suitable candidates to take others. The reasoning is that with the waves of resources now sprouting throughout heaven, in 10,000 years, those who now fill the seats by default will be able to live up to their seats' past requirements and make the Sea Dream Temple mightier than ever. How does that sound? Conrad proposed while Ruthy's eyes shone with enlightenment. How clever! She whispered with a hand clap, and prompted by that wave of enlightenment, turned to again face Conrad. How is it possible for a rake of your caliber to be this frighteningly cunning? I must admit that you make a fool of all preconceived beliefs regarding decadent philanderers. Ruthy praised while nodding for emphasis, and as she unwittingly lowered her face toward Conrad's, he raised his to meet hers and peered deep into her eyes. That is only natural. Born with peerless talent and a preternatural understanding of all things within heaven and earth, even I sometimes fail to comprehend the depth of my greatness. Conrad brazenly replied, causing Ruthy to roll her eyes and push her palm against his face. Go Awa? Ruthy began, but as her palm neared Conrad's face, he tilted his head to the left, caught her hand within his, and gave the back a gentle kiss. Realizing how much proximity she just allowed, Ruthy swallowed the remainder of her words, not daring to speak further. But as Conrad's eyes left her hand to lock back on hers, it was as if electricity filled the air, and an irresistible magnetism pulled her toward him. As the Devi floundered, Conrad took the reins, pulling her into his arms as he lowered her onto the bed and draped her with his form. He didn't speak further. Words would only ruin the spark. His lips lowered onto Ruthy's, trapping her in his delightful embrace with no way out. She didn't resist, letting his tongue coil with hers and their lips mesh in an increasingly ardent kiss. But as the heat rose and hearts drummed, a clatter of steps echoed from beyond the door, announcing the arrival of a hasty newcomer. Those steps, Ruthy could recognize among 10,000. Those were Kama's. Alarmed, she broke the kiss and rose with the glint of a thief caught mid-larceny shining within her eyes. Love, are you there? Kama's voice echoed from beyond the door, causing Conrad's lips to curve in a fiendish grin. Chapter 495 with No Way Out Part 2. Why is he here? Ruthy wondered as her mind fell to chaos. Although Kama's visit was by itself nothing spectacular, the timing was distressing, to say the least. Moreover, she was now supposed to be tending to her father's injuries and prepare the chamber for his next 10,000 years of seclusion. Knowing Kama, he would have given her at least a day to handle all those before showing himself. This was out of character. But as Ruthy debated how to answer, the amused Conrad's lips curved into a smile. Kama's impromptu visit was not merely something he'd anticipated. He also knew the reason behind. Following the Essence nurturing forest calamity, knowing that the new powers dwarfed all his plans, Surya resolved to take drastic measures and gave his little brother, Kama, explicit orders. Little brother, kill Daksha and seize control of the Sea Dream Temple's treasury. I have dire needs for their Dreamstone and Godjade reserves. My primal sun lotus nears full maturation. Using the Dreamstone and Godjades, I can weave a formation to amplify the results. Now that the restrictions are lifted, to say nothing of the peak of the legendary God rank, if everything goes according to plan, I can get half-step into the Overgod rank within 10,000 years. As for you, with Daksha out of the way, you no longer have any threat looming over you, and can rule the Sea Dream Temple alongside Ruthy. Don't worry, I will help you shift the blame on the Thonian Primogen. Afterward, my breakthrough will enable me to make you a whole man again. Those were Surya's precise orders. Orders that at first filled Kama with complicated emotions. After all, though he didn't bear any good feeling toward Daksha and surely hoped to see him dead, at the end of the day, He was Rathi's father. If exposed, she'd never forgive him. But then he realized that Surya's assistance ensured that regardless of how things went, he could control the outcome. Not only control it, but even regain the lost part of himself in a short time. How could he reject it? This was not just an opportunity, it was the opportunity. It didn't take long before Kama agreed, and to make the operation a success, Surya bestowed upon him his strongest 8-star god artifact. Imbued by Surya's truth-wielding, it would allow Kama to control all variables. And knowing he was about to betray his love, a roller coaster of emotions swept Kama's heart, and against his better judgment, he rushed toward her, using the truth artifact to locate her exact location. Little did he know that Conrad grasped the whole matter. Rathi? Again, Kama's voice echoed, and this time the tone carried plain puzzlement. Having no other recourse, the flurried Devi spun toward Conrad. You need to leave now, she murmured while falling into a false cultivation stance, crossing her legs and closing her eyes in a lotus stance to deceive Kama into thinking her in a deep trance. Alas, Conrad shook his head. I'm not going anywhere. In fact, let's make this more interesting. Conrad replied, and while sneaking behind the alarmed Rathi, snapped his fingers. Prompted by a sudden impulse, Kama shoved the door open, rushing into the room with anxious eyes. As Conrad lowered his chin against her left shoulder and nestled his face with hers, Rathi's heart almost ruptured. But strangely, as Kama swept the scene and eyed her, silently cultivating form from head to toe, he showed no reaction. It was as if the form of Conrad pressed against her wholly eluded him. Realizing the nefarious philanderer must have played tricks, Rathi inwardly heaved a sigh of relief. But at that time, Conrad wrapped his hands around her waist and trailed his tongue across her slender neck while Kama stepped increasingly closer toward her. Rathi's heart rate broke the sound barrier, while breath shortness assailed her. Her eyes opened wide and she gasped for breath. Ah! The astounded Devi panted, inwardly cursing heavens for placing the embodiment of decadence in her path. Alarmed, Kama believed Rathi neared cultivation deviation, rushed to her side, and attempted to hold her hands within his. But afraid of revealing the turbulences within her pulse, Rathi avoided the hand grasp, causing Kama's face to contort into a frown. But as soon as it flashed, it dispersed. Love, what is wrong with you? Kama inquired in an urgent tone, demanding explanations. However, no reply came from Rathi's lips. Instead, her face flushed red, and her panting intensified. And with Conrad languorously kissing her cheeks, neck, and shoulders, how else could it be? Worse, the devilish creature's hands cupped her cantaloupe-sized breasts, applying only enough pressure that with her panting and heaving chest, Kama would not notice the cupping. But little did Rathi expect that Conrad would push the vice to the next level and pinch her nipples. Ah, cultivation error, cultivation error. Rathi attempted to stifle her moan. But how could Kama not notice the strange intonations within her breath? Was it possible that out of sexual frustration, she resorted to a new kind of self-pleasuring technique? As his thoughts neared that territory, Kama's frown returned, and as if to help him onto that road, Conrad freed one of Rathi's fully erect nipples and lowered the free hand onto her crotch, tracing his finger across her rising clit before lowering it on her labia, all through the fabric of her pants. At first, it was but a casual trailing, but Rathi could already feel jolts of electricity assail her from inside. It was as if every single one of Conrad's fingers induced vibration waves meant to heighten sexual pleasure. Meanwhile, he still played her left breast as his tongue and lips danced on her neckline. Ah! Rathi released an involuntary moan, this time without concealment. Kama staggered on his seat, and going a step further, Conrad pressed his fingers on the Devi's lower lips, teasing them with a gradual rubbing, while the formless vibration waves carried on with their assault. Now, as if oblivious to Kama's presence, Rathi wantonly panted. Ooh-ooh-oh. The moans left no room for interpretation, and Kama rose in outrage. Rathi, what the hell are you doing? I may not be able to, not be able to perform in other departments, but if you need release, you can just ask me. How can you resort to such techniques in my presence?" The Deva snarled in a mixture of rage, shame, and indignation. Rithi, however, failed to understand the words and clenched her now moistening inner thighs as she tensed in an impending orgasm. Uhu! A wave of bliss swept over the Devi's mind, and as she shuddered in her orgasm, she arched her back, her lips curved into an O shape, and she collapsed in Conrad's grasp. "You!" Kama growled in humiliation, and red with shame, turned heels to bolt past the door. With a smirk, Conrad lowered the still trembling Devi onto the bed and pulled up her belly shirt to release those ample breasts of hers. Now, let's move on to the main course." Chapter 496 with No Way Out Part 3. As Conrad draped Rithi with his form, a mixture of lust and fright submerged the Devi's mind. It was as if a grand fell beast emerged from the chaos of her heart to hurl her into a world of depravity and consume her body and soul. Again, she'd fallen under Conrad's spell, and this time, failed to muster the strength to oppose him. Perhaps due to Kama's witnessing of her previous look, perhaps because she convinced herself that no manner of struggle could place her beyond the grasp of the profane prince. In any case, Rithi abandoned herself to his grasp, panting against his lips, and not allowing herself to think further. Thoughts would ruin her. For an instant, Conrad moved no further, holding the goddess' eyes bound to his icy blue gaze, and facing her with a smile she found oh so disarming. In that instant, Rithi felt as if gentleness settled within the grand beast's eyes, a sensation that mixed with her erratic heart to produce more chaos. While Conrad maintained eye contact, the Devi's breathing grew more ragged, and the electricity coursing in her veins heightening in intensity. Never had she felt so taken by a man's eyes. Never could anyone's smile grip her with such passion. Aflutter, Rithi did the only thing her spellbound heart found reasonable. She leaned in and took Conrad's lips in hers, thenceforth making her final mistake. In the instant their lips met, greed blossomed in Rithi's heart, greed for those lips, for that tongue, for that breath, for all those things she didn't wish to part from. Conrad met the kiss without delay, letting his tongue coil with the greedy Devi's and their lips blend in an intimate dance. But though his heart rate remained steady throughout, at first, Rithi's grew even more chaotic, but as the warmth of Conrad's touch swept her, and his saliva dripped down her throat, her passion grew more stable, and she wrapped her slender hands around his neck. Her exposed breasts now pressed his chest, poking him with her erect nipples while she pressed her lips and tongue against his, seeking to take all he had to offer while giving back her whole. And as Rithi surrendered in the devil's arms, his hands climbed over her back, stripping her of her shirt before again pressing her onto the bed. When Conrad stood convinced that, in this instant, desire and bliss had washed away all of Rithi's apprehension, he lowered his hand to her waist and pulled down her pants. Rithi's dripping inner thighs sprang to full view, appearing alongside her splendid legs and thighs that would have driven any man mad with lust. Feeling Conrad's hand go down her thigh, Rithi felt a new surge of electricity fill her and spread her legs open, giving him access to the coveted prize while still passionately devouring his lips. But when Conrad's middle finger poked her lower lip's entrance and broke into her inner walls to start fingering her cunt, Rithi soon found herself unable to resist the multi-front assault. At first, she merely panted in Conrad's lips while he did most of the kissing, but soon, even that became too challenging, and as Conrad broke the kiss to hickey her neck and play her tits, Rithi moaned in delight. Ah! And even as the rhythm of the Devi's moans grew faster, her cunt contracted and expanded around Conrad's fingers to produce squelching sounds. Following a thorough mapping out of Rithi's sweet spots, Conrad's paced fingering grew faster, making Rithi arch her back while he let go of her hickey-filled neck to suck her left tit. And while Conrad's lips suckled her breast and erect nipple, Rithi couldn't help but stick out her tongue and groan in ecstasy. Oh, oh, oh. Again, she neared orgasm, but this time, Conrad didn't plan to let her off so easily. In an unexpected move, the Devil Emperor let go of the goddess's breast while withdrawing his fingers. An involuntary whine escaped Rithi's lips as she suddenly felt empty, void of those mind-numbing waves of pleasure. Conrad, however, didn't let her wait for long and vanished to reappear on the ground, with his face between her legs. His hands moved beneath Rithi's thighs, spreading her legs further while lifting them up and putting her cunt in plain view. Having never experienced such exposure, Rithi floundered. But when Conrad kissed her lower lips and flicked his tongue across her clit, that bit of struggle vanished in oblivion. With the tantalizing flicks, Conrad teased Rithi's erect clit, then pushed his tongue into her fold, drinking her love nectar as he did. With lust-glazed eyes, Rithi placed her hands on Conrad's skull, pushing him deeper into her cunt while his masterful tongue brought her to a new paradise. "Oh, oh, oh," she groaned, shuddering in a succession of orgasms, while Conrad trained her body to the pleasures his touch could provide. At that time, somewhere in the Sea Dream Temple, Kama felt a wave of apprehension well up within his chest and rushed back to Rithi's chambers. Imagine his surprise when he first heard the succession of unrestrained groans echoing from her room and the wave of ire that burgeoned within his chest. Alas, having never seen such a side of her, curiosity got the best of him, and he stepped toward the door, opening it enough to see her lost in ecstasy, with her legs open wide, her tongue sticking out, and her hands holding. Wait, holding what? It was as if an invisible man stood between Rithi's legs, devouring her cunt as she gripped his hair. But no man stood within the room. As a half-stepped legendary god, Kama didn't believe such larceny could occur beneath his gaze, that a deity could cloak his presence and taste his wife under his nose. This can't be. It has to be a strange technique. It has to. Kama convinced himself while his heart drummed within his chest. Alas, the slurping sound echoing from Rithi's cunt didn't help, and as if to give his thoughts validation, Kama pulled out a white ring, the artifact bestowed by Surya, and activated its truth laws to dispel lies and reveal all the truth within that room. Fortunately, nothing occurred. Relief and shame filled Kama's trembling heart, but little did he know that a man did devour his wife's cunt, and that man's lips now curved into a devilish grin. Conrad stood up, unbuckled his pants, and revealed his erect rod to Rithi's lustful eyes. Climbing over the bed, Conrad stopped between the Devi's spread legs, placing the tip of his cock against her lower lips, poking the entrance while holding eye contact. Unaware of Kama's peeping and hypnotized by Conrad's eyes, Rithi cupped his cheeks, welcoming his impending intrusion. And it came. With a slow thrust, Conrad spread open the Devi's flower, broke her hymen, and filled her pristine cunt with his shaft. "Oh!" Rithi groaned at the intrusion, but Conrad absorbed her into a kiss while releasing the might of his Empyrean rod to wash away that sharp pain and fill her with bliss. Naturally, seeing the blood trail dripping from Rithi's expanding lower lips, even if Kama were the most harebrained of donkeys, he'd realize what anyone else would. Robbed. He'd been robbed. Chapter 497 Self-Deceit. The words flew within Kama's mind, and his heart ruptured. But as if to punish him further, Rithi's body rocked under Conrad's slow-paced thrusts, moving up and down as she kissed him with raw passion. Her tits bounced, smacking the invisible wall that was Conrad's chest. And as the Devi grew accustomed to this level of pleasure, Conrad increased the tempo, driving himself faster into her, and with every thrust, filling her to the hilt. The pounding then began. It all played before Kama's gaze. He saw it all, but instead of barging in and screaming his rage, he closed the door and slid onto the ground, not daring to face it. If he did, it was true, and truth he'd have to challenge. Better deceive himself into thinking it a lie. Better blame it all on an illusion. Rithi was his. She could never betray him. This was a lie. Ooh, oh, oh, oh. Alas, the sound of bodies pressing one another in a torrid mating, the sound of balls kissing his cheeks, and those groans soaring from Rathi's lips spoke otherwise. They spoke the truth of her ecstasy, leaving Kama unable to deceive himself. Again, Conrad's rhythm intensified, and again the rate of Rathi's moans shot up. Wrapping her legs around his waist, the Devi clinched onto him, welcoming his pounding and plowing of her conquered garden. And plow Conrad did. As Rathi hit her umpteenth orgasm, Conrad's flaming, tensing shaft sheathed one last time and released jets of spunk deep into her, painting her inner walls white while filling her to the brim. "Oh, so full," Rathi whispered in a last groan that didn't escape Kama's ears. Aware that the longer he stayed, the harder it would be to deceive himself, Kama stood up and with silent strides left the accursed scene. Not that it mattered. This merely was the beginning. While Rathi's trembling legs still clung on his waist, Conrad spun, shifting their positions by placing her on top, then bending the both of them in the lotus position. Though her legs remained wrapped around Conrad's waist, Rathi now sat on his lap with her weakened hands lying on either side of his thighs. Unwilling to waste this session, Conrad triggered his Law Revolution creed, causing the multicolor mist representing all the laws to emerge from his form and surround them both. "Hold on tight," Conrad whispered in the groggy goddess' ears, and as if awakened by his words, she raised her hands, tying her arms around his neck while the Law Revolution creed filled her limbs with a new source of energy. The pounding resumed, this time with upward thrusts, and though the new position forced Conrad to lower his speed, it allowed him to thoroughly enjoy every corner of Rathi's cunt at a pace she found tantalizing. As the Devi indulged in her first dual cultivation session, the mist clouded her vision while still heightening her sensitivity. And with every one of Conrad's thrusts, Rathi replied by smacking her ass back on his rod, meeting his every move in a subconscious drive. "Oh, oh, more, oh." Rathi's groans and greed for more of Conrad boomed within the room, and to that Conrad replied by bending her over and hammering that delightful cunt of hers faster than the eyes could see. Orgasms succeeded one another, with Conrad filling Rathi's already cum-dripping cunt with more spunk. This carried on till heaven's 9 suns set, replaced by its cold blue night, and still, they carried on, shifting in a succession of positions while exploring one another's bodies. On that night, Conrad toured all corners of Rathi's magnificent form, and by the time dawn announced itself, his cum dripped from her front and rear, leaving no hole unfilled. Even with her half-step legendary god cultivation, Rathi couldn't endure much more and collapsed on the bed, falling asleep for the first time in eons. Meanwhile, Conrad sat cross-legged to digest his gains. Following the battle with the Primogens, Conrad absorbed a tremendous quantity of depraved energies and was ready to break through. Now Rathi added hers to the mix, thereby opening the road to new levels. Although devil cultivation required tremendous energy, with all that accumulation, Conrad didn't doubt he could rise to the peak of the grand devil realm, or at least get infinitely close to it. At the same time, his infiniteness insight had met a barrier and was ready to break through the profound level. To top it all, the battle with blood nether allowed him to get a better understanding of truth and life. Transcending in one of those laws shouldn't require much trouble. However, the premise was that he secluded himself to cultivate for some time. Only with a serious secluded cultivation session could he digest all those gains and cause his strength to rise to brand new heights. Especially profound infiniteness insight. Starting with that level, Conrad could use infiniteness in battle without fear of blowing himself up. Still, he couldn't rush into seclusion now. There still were several things to handle, one of them being the establishment of a sect, and alongside the fate-transcendent Verena, Rob Heaven's destiny. Having done his good deed for the day, Conrad stood up, and without waiting for Rathi to regain her senses, vanished in swirling black winds to reappear in Daksha's chambers. As expected, following his previous disgrace, Kama used Surya's ring to magnify the lingering wounds wreaking havoc within Daksha's mangled body. If no one made a move, the Mara Primogene would, in the coming days, collapse from those wounds, perishing in body and soul. Naturally, all would blame Conrad for it. Childish, Conrad scoffed and waved his right hand, causing formless energies to infiltrate Daksha's body and dispel Kama's interference. Again, he vanished, but this time, reappeared within his chambers where Vinarad, Celine, Heidi, and the Valkyrie awaited his return. So, result? Celine asked with a knowing smile, clearly aware of what Conrad had been up to. Tilting his head, Conrad glanced toward her with his lips curled in a devious grin. What do you think? Conrad countered, causing Celine to lift up her chin and arch her eyebrows as she stepped toward him. Let's see. The Nephilim bimbo mumbled, and as she stopped beside Conrad, she aimed her right index toward him. As if anticipating the move, Conrad met Celine's finger with his, and the two said in tandem, "Scored." A complicit wink followed. Chapter 498, Removing Hidden Dangers. Following a brief gathering with his ladies, Conrad set out to handle Rithi's second issue. Sitting cross-legged within his chambers, the devil used his truth embodiment to connect to the minds of all deities within the celestial world that were somehow aware or connected to Rithi's presence in the essence nurturing forest. Those included the likes of Surya, Durga, Daksha, their sect elders, Kama, and even the warden. This time, Conrad saw through the warden's eternal shroud, again frowning at the confirmation of what he previously felt. Setting aside that news, Conrad rewrote their minds, convincing them that Rithi was never there, to begin with, and replacing her presence with another top Mara elder. That elder then vanished from the Sea Dream Temple, and his life plate crumbled, thereby reducing the Mara elder count to 6. By the time the 9 suns rose, Conrad had completed the cleaning, and back in her chambers, Rithi awoke from her slumber. Her groggy eyes soon regained their vigor, and as she recalled the past day and night's events, a self-deprecating expression appeared on her face. Ultimately, I erred. What a terrible mistake. Rithi sighed, but strangely, the words didn't ring true in her mind. Though her better judgment convinced her that last night was the worst mistake of her life, her mind and body wholly disagreed. The numbing pleasure kept her lying on her side, while she could still feel the aftermath of all Conrad released in her holes, alongside all the hickeys on her neck and breasts. Even as she lay there, her body craved more of Conrad's touch, filling her mind with the images of him possessing her body and soul. Alas, as she rose from the bed and donned a magenta and gold dress, Rithi was still determined to put an end to this uncontrollable relationship. Or well, at least give it a good try. But in an unsurprising turn of event, by the time she reached Conrad to say the 5 words, "Last night was a mistake," Rithi found herself pressed against a wall, bent over while Conrad hammered her cunt from behind. With the game thoroughly lost, she could only repeat the mistake throughout another 2 hours of fiery lovemaking. Afterward, Rithi completed the arrangements for Daksha's seclusion and announced a series of shocking changes to the entirety of the Sea Dream Temple. One of them being Conrad's promotion to elder rank under his pseudonym of Rudra. Meanwhile, within the Infernal Realm's northern domain, Yvonne, Else, Gulistan, and Kron sat across a jet-black table carved of infernal wood with the 3 state protectors standing guard nearby. But while Kron kept his eyes shut close, the remaining 3s flickered with gravity. Gulistan, isn't this too hasty? Yvonne inquired with a tone that spoke gravity. However, it was with firm determination that Gulistan faced her. Not one bit. Tauroth must die. The sooner, the better. Gulistan declared, speaking words that caused Yvonne's spellbinding face to contort into a frown. Following Conrad's epic battle with Heaven and Hell's strongest, and the confrontation with Bloodnether, Gulistan gathered the 4 of them to speak those 3 words. Tauroth must die. It would be a lie to say Yvonne didn't question her motives. But having now been together for more than 2 centuries, she could read in Gulistan's eyes and tone an unprecedented urgency. In the meantime, just like Kron, Else remained silent. I know what you're thinking. Coming from me, Those words seem laced in personal hatred. And truth be told, the old goat's death would not bring a tear from me. However, I have long since let go of my past resentment. Today, it is inconsequential. Gulistan began, and indeed, Conrad's rod and touch had wholly erased any spark of Talroth within her mind. If she now requested the Demon King's execution, it was for Conrad's sake. Although Conrad primarily sent us to wreak havoc within Hell and pit its ruling houses against one another, another reason for our presence was to gather more information and map out a flawless strategy for his absorption of Hell's will. Thanks to Kron's truth projection, the three of us witnessed the entirety of the battle, but more than that, we observed the various demon primogens and their reactions. When even Dahlgren and Asherah quivered, Talroth remained undisturbed, as if none of this stands beyond his expectations. Worse, he appeared satisfied. This got me thinking that perhaps, all along, I've been questioning the old goat's motives in the wrong way. That maybe, we've been following his script from the very beginning. Gulistan stressed that last part with profound gravity, and before she could carry on, Else chimed in. Before Conrad was born, Talroth wanted half-human children. Why? For him, he prepared tools that could open the road to becoming an artificial Nephilim. Why? For him, he imposed a contract that would force the Circers into making Conrad a world god. And according to Conrad, he did the same to his other half-human scions. Why? What is the connection? Half-humans are not true demons. Hell's will cannot fully control them. Nephilims stand beyond all realm will's jurisdiction, and world gods hold the potential to lord over an entire realm. Though Conrad went far beyond all Talroth could imagine, I believe it is safe to say that on that road, he also accomplished all Talroth wanted. We now stand at the last chapter of his script, which most likely targets Hell's will. Talroth wants to be free of Hell's will, and can only accomplish that feat through Conrad's hands. Else reasoned, pulling an approving nod from Gulistan. Now, there is nothing wrong with that. For an expert of Talrotha's caliber to want freedom from Hell's control is something anyone can understand. With his talent, without Hell's will's suppression, he would have long since become an overgod. How can he accept remaining suppressed in such an absolute manner? Using his progeny to free himself also seems reasonable. However, what happens after that? Would trade Hell's control for Conrad's? I don't believe it. Gulistan followed while both Yvonne and Else closed their eyes in deep thoughts. If he's willing to see Conrad reach that altitude, then he must have the means or confidence to regain control once freed of Hell's will. That is unavoidable. Talroth will not live within anyone's yoke, but we have no idea of what his hidden card is. Now that Conrad's strength has risen to this level, the destruction of Hell's will nears. To prevent hidden dangers, we must kill Talroth before that. Either crush him in body and soul or force him to reveal his hidden cards. Gulistan declared, while clenching her hand with determination. Right afterward, Else nodded in approval. I agree. We cannot wait for him to show his hand, or we might not be able to counter it. Now is the time to strike. Else approved. Yvonne, however, remained silent. And when her eyes opened, they locked on Kron, who didn't speak a word throughout. You may speak true, but we cannot make a move without Conrad's blessing. Kron, what do you think? Yvonne inquired. At the end of the day, the one with the best understanding of Conrad's will was none other than Kron, his soul twin. Now that they weren't by his side, only Kron could speak for him. Chapter 499, 7th Sea Dream Elder. Master once said that those similar, heaven and hells will behave in dramatically opposed ways. Heaven is impartial while hell revels in favoritism. Talroth is hell's last child, the most spoiled and favored son. His bond to hell's will transcends that of all the rest and is on par with the overlords. However, within the infernal realm, killing the overlord is easier than killing Talroth. Unlike the other demon primogen's unhallowed sanctity physique, Talrotha's is special and carries a strand of hell's will. If not for that, With all his transgressions, the Overlord would have long since killed him. His familiar also can't be underestimated. Kron replied with his eyes still shut close. A demon's closest ally was always his familiar. Some would keep them as the hidden guardians of their houses or #1 generals. But regardless of the position, they always held paramount status within their demonic master's house. On that topic, Tauroth was no different from the rest. Of course, with my current strength, killing him wouldn't be difficult. However, the unavoidable result is Hell's Will's wanton wrath. Master's plans don't need that kind of disturbance. I don't believe he will sanction the move, at least not for now. Kron reasoned, and those were indeed Yvonne's worries. Still, he connected his mind to Conrad's to request his direct input. 5 seconds afterward, his eyes opened wide. Master just spoke. Once he seizes his sword, deals with the firmament's troublemaker and subverts heaven's will, we shall handle Tauroth. In the meantime, have Elia and Helmet pay their grandfather a visit. Kron pursued, causing the three's eyes to widen in disbelief. But as they pondered the decision, disbelief soon made way for enlightenment. I see. It is indeed time. Yvonne replied with a radiant smile. Soon afterward, Kron personally fetched Elia and Helmet to lead them into the southern domain's capital. In the meantime, news from the Sea Dream Temple spread throughout the entirety of the Sea Dream domain, filling its trillions of citizens with incomparable elation. Especially those human talents with shackled bloodline strength but firm Tao hearts. They could now see the hope of higher levels. After all, though heaven now abounded with opportunities, only the Devis and high-ranking spirits possessed the qualifications to fight for them. Now though, things were different. And as waves of talents and deities from various races made their way toward the Sea Dream Temple for examination, within the Sea Dream Temple's Elder Hall, under his previous Mara disguise, Conrad received the questioning of the 5 Mar Elders and Kama, who held the title of Second Elder. Oftentimes, when assessing the Sea Dream Temple's strength, high-ranking Devis wouldn't count Kama within the Elder lot, omitting his status of Second Elder. The reason was simple. He not only didn't practice the Sea Dream Temple's skills, but was one of Surya's most trusted kin. Calling him a spy was only accurate. Still, in such an official occasion, the Maras couldn't exclude him. Each elder occupied a lofty seat, with Rithi standing between the 6 of them. As the Great Elder, her seat had always been the most honorable. But now that she also held the position of acting Temple Lord, her authority stood without equal. In her right hand, Rithi held a silver elder insignia. In her left, a book comprising all of the Sea Dream Temple's laws, rules, and obligations. Rudra, having now broken through to the cosmic god rank, under our new system, you are qualified to become the 7th Elder. In the future, I hope you can catch up to the peers that now look down on you, and bring glory to the Sea Dream Temple. Rithi began, and indeed, while her decision to lower the requirements for all positions garnered widespread approval, making Rudra the new Elder was another matter. Acting Temple Lord, I'm afraid this is improper. Although he holds merit for saving the capital, this Rudra's background is, at best, dubious. Without a thorough investigation, how can we name him Elder? Moreover, the Sea Dream domain might not have any cosmic god available, but among the new recruits, having 2 or 3 breakthrough is unavoidable. Giving him the position seems too hasty? The 3rd Elder chimed in, speaking the words swirling in the minds of the rest. In their ancient eyes, the whole matter reeked of nepotism, a vice they previously didn't believe their great elder capable of. But considering the recent rumors, they couldn't help but believe it. How could the foundation of a cardinal sect be restored through nepotism? Worse, elders possess tremendous power, access to a plethora of information, and the right to found their own branch within the sect. Granting that kind of boon to someone of unclear background was downright ridiculous. This decision, they would challenge. On the contrary, Kama remained silent, keeping his golden eyes locked solely on Conrad with an intensity any would have found unnerving. It was almost as if he wished to peel off Conrad's skin with his stare. And with the rumors going around, who could blame him? Still, before the elders' pressure, Conrad remained undisturbed. Their paltry resistance was doomed to failure. Either Raytheon made them fall in line, or he would. Never did I expect that my first appointment as acting Temple Lord would meet such opposition. How disheartening. Raytheon replied, and at the same time, unleashed her cultivation base. It erupted with a dreadful pressure that suppressed all the elders where they stood, constricting and choking them with a might they couldn't resist. Instantly, the elders' eyes widened in fright, and Kama's attention shifted back onto Raytheon. Early stage of the legendary god rank, they realized in a stupor. With the restrictions lifted, that Raytheon could break through came without surprise. A few of them would soon seclude themselves to pursue that rank. The problem lay in the timing. It had not even been 3 days since the restrictions were lifted. Even if Raytheon was fast, she should have taken several years or even decades of secluded cultivation to break through. How did it happen already? To say nothing of them, even Kama was startled. His mind reeled, and he came up with the only viable conclusion: dual cultivation. And indeed, he was right. Conrad's Law Revolution creed crushed the barriers still shackling Raytheon, thereby allowing her to break through. A pity that this eminence is the Lord, and you, the subjects. When the Lord commands, the subject obeys. Who required your input? If you have any complaints, save them for when the Temple Lord emerges from seclusion. Raytheon decreed, forcing all elders to swallow their spite. Indeed, this was nepotism at its worst. Rising from her seat, Raytheon stepped toward Conrad to place the insignia, a rule book, in his hands. He welcomed both with his hands cupped. Henceforth, you are the 7th elder. Our Sea Dream City is now holding the auction of the enslaved Nagas. That event is doomed to gather troublemakers. In your quality of elder, go and ensure the auction's peace. Raytheon ordered, following Conrad's request to the letter. With an inward smile, he bowed toward her and proclaimed, "As you command, acting Temple Lord." Chapter 500 Negation Girl. Alongside Selene, Verena, the Valkyrie, and Heidi, Conrad left the Sea Dream Temple to return to the Sea Dream City, which now teemed with bluster. Even as they flew toward it, they could see legions of cultivators, from divine ascension to high gods, making their way toward the Sea Dream Temple for examination. Meanwhile, within the Sea Dream City, Devis of various backgrounds gathered. The Primal Sun Sect, the Eternal Void Palace, the Radiant Light Mountain, alongside representatives of the 7 other hegemonic sects gathered. Although the strength of most of them had been crippled by the loss of primogens and deities above the high god rank, their elder councils remained relatively unharmed. The past strength balance had crumbled, with the Primal Sun Sect now standing as the undisputed number 1, while the ranking of some cardinal sects threatened to fall beneath the divine sects. In fact, having lost Brihaspati, Anura, and all its deities between high god and ancestral god levels, the Radiant Light Mountain now ranked at the bottom of all hegemonic sections. Their empty treasury didn't help. In order to save their sect from the inevitable decline, the elders pooled all their resources to make a clean sweep in this auction and convert the Radiant Light Mountain into a dual cultivation sect. Those were not merely the most popular, but when properly administrated, also held the strongest potential. Others held similar ideas. The Eternal Void Elders reasoned that a one-time investment into the Naga Devis and Chandra's consorts would allow them to open dual cauldron houses, glorified brothels other deities could enjoy for a price. On the one hand, it would allow them to make large profits they could then reinvest into their sect. On the other hand, their male disciples could use the Nagas for quick breakthroughs. But while the majority came to put the Nagas to use, a minority merely wished to free relatives lost in Chandra's lecherous hands. And as Conrad's party landed within the Sea Dream City, Hyde's eyes swept the legions of groups making their way toward the auction hall. "Dad, besides getting you new beauties, what are we here for?" Heidi couldn't help but ask. If he merely wished to acquire the Nagas, Conrad needn't make the trip personally. He could always do it by using Raytheon as proxy. His presence indicated that there was more to this trip than he previously let on. The remaining high-profile members of the various hegemonic sects gathered today. It is an excellent opportunity for me to take control of their hearts and sects by proxy. In the near future, this will make our subversion of heaven a whole lot simpler. Conrad replied while they crossed the streets to land before the auction hall. As the auction's titular managing elder, although he didn't have to do any actual work, registering his presence before the auction began was a must. The Sea Dream Temple merely handled the auction on the warden's orders. The Nagas didn't belong to them, and if they wanted a share, just like the others, they'd have to pay the price. As for the auction's earnings, 50% would go to the Sea Dream Temple while the remaining 50% would fall into the hands of the Heaven Warding Temple. Brahmas may not care for material wealth, but cultivation cared. But as Conrad's party neared the auction hall, a nearby commotion grabbed their attention. Revolting creature, how dare you fall in the path of my esteemed self? An overbearing youth with the golden hair of the Ravmaloks snarled in a mixture of indignation and disgust. With a glance, Conrad could see that the youth's age neared 300, while his cultivation stood at the mid-stage of the minor god rank. Though the ratio between age and cultivation indicated his position in Surya's house couldn't be shallow, in Conrad's eyes, such a deity wasn't even qualified to be called an ant. In typical times, Conrad wouldn't have paid any more attention to the Ravmalak young master's tantrum, but as he laid eyes on the victim, a strange glint flashed in his eyes, and without hesitation, he walked toward the scene. There, surrounded by 4 Sun spirit bodyguards at the Nihility god rank, the Ravmalak youth trampled a blindfolded girl who, from the contours of her face, didn't seem older than 18. In the higher realm where no one was younger than 200, that was, of course, impossible. But as they followed Conrad toward the scene, neither Verena, the Valkyrie, Celine, or Heidi could feel any cultivation base from that girl. Without a shred of doubt, she was mortal. A mortal human girl without the strength to truss up a chicken. When the realization settled in their minds, their faces contorted into frowns. Conrad, however, didn't appear surprised. With unkempt black hair stopping above her waist, a torn black dress and half-broken sandals, the blindfolded girl's appearance couldn't look shabbier. Strangely, within heaven where cold didn't exist, that girl wore gloves. That type of person would have never dared to block the path of a Ravmalak lord. However, she wasn't given much of a choice in the matter. If the chains binding her wrists and legs already made her mobility challenging, another affliction forced her to collapse in that young master, her captor's path: epilepsy. Indeed, as the Ravmalak lord ruthlessly trampled her, the girl spasmed on the ground while her eyes rolled back in a sudden bout of epilepsy. Immortal, afflicted with a chronic disease, and unable to cultivate. Even without Conrad's input, Celine and Verena recognized the girl for what she was: a forbidden physique owner. And indeed, they were right. In that girl, Conrad saw the first of the 3 forbidden physiques, the plight of worlds, hailed as the Omniverse's most dreadful creation, the absolute negation physique. Even without his powers, Conrad didn't doubt that beneath the blindfold, the girl didn't have sight. The curse absolute negation physique owners bore was inarguably the worst. With a glance, they could negate all concepts, aspects, life, death, truth, fate. With 30 locks unlocked, supremes aside, there was nothing an absolute negation physique owner couldn't instantly negate. But twisted by regretless curse, the owner couldn't control the ability. As long as they saw or directly touched something, the ability would kick into gear. Worse, besides their epilepsy, they were immortal and endowed with fast regeneration abilities. Gouging out their eyes was useless. Therefore, those powerful enough to resist the negation would bind the physique owner's eyes. That girl was the same. Beneath the blindfold, her eyes were bound by pins and threads, leaving her in perpetual, horrendous pain. By the time Conrad reached the circle of humans, spirits, and devas formed around this uncanny scene, the girl's epilepsy bout had ended, and she just lay there, enduring the abuse with her chained hands and legs preventing her from revolting. As if used to this kind of treatment, she didn't groan, she didn't whimper and merely stood there in silence. But for some reason, as he glanced at this girl whose looks could not hold a candle to any of his beauties, Conrad felt a tinge of ire blossoming within his chest. It wasn't humanity. It was personal. Even he couldn't explain it. Now, he didn't want to know the how, the who, or why. Stretching out his hand, Conrad made a grasping motion, and to the onlooker's shock, the girl slid toward him. Ignoring the Ravmalak lord, Conrad lowered his eyes toward the girl's battered frame, which now healed at a rapid pace. Bold. Who the hell are you? How dare you intervene in my business? That girl is a slave prepared for my grandfather, the sun god, Surya. With the Sea Dream Temple's current shape, do you Maras dare go against my grandf? The Ravmalak lord began, but before he could finish his words, Conrad's left hand chopped empty air, and beheaded by an invisible blade, the Ravmalak's head spiraled into the sky before tumbling onto the ground. His corpse soon followed. Alarmed, the bodyguards staggered. This was a direct descendant of the sun god. In the Sea Dream City, who dared harm him? But they weren't given time to ponder further before collapsing in a puddle of blood. Without further disturbance, Conrad knelt beside the girl and took her into his arms. Feeling the unfamiliar and unprecedented grasp, she floundered, shaking her head from left to right in glaring fright. Who are you? What do you want? I have nothing to offer you. The girl rattled off. But though her clouded eyes couldn't register his features, as he glanced toward her, she could feel a soothing warmth rippling from his heart and imagine the gentle smile plastered on his face. Confusion filled her mind. Right now, no one. But if you are willing, I shall take you as my disciple. Henceforth, so long as I stand, none shall harm you. Conrad pledged, causing both the girl and his lady's confusion to shoot through the sky. Chapter 501 Your Disciple Greets You. Though Conrad treated his harem members with incomparable care, the premise was that they were his. Never did he show such attention toward a wholly unrelated woman with nothing to do with him. If they didn't know him better, Verena and Celine would have believed his display to be a show of compassion. And when even they couldn't comprehend what went on, one could only imagine how startled the girl was. And in that situation, she spoke the only word she could think of. Why? Indeed, if someone appeared out of nowhere to rescue you from damnation and promised the world, the first question was why? And having never experienced any form of warmth in her life, the girl just couldn't wrap her head around Conrad's move. Because such is my wish. Your innate talent may not be anything extraordinary, but your heart is the most suitable for inheriting my craft. In time, I believe you shall be one of the sharpest spears by my side. Conrad replied while releasing a formless force that shattered the girl's chains. In a clang, the broken pieces of metal tumbled onto the ground. Lowering his right hand onto the girl's blindfold, Conrad erased the pins and wires binding her eyes, freeing her of that long-standing pain, but still keeping the blindfold on. In a flash, the girl found herself free of those horrible shackles, but as if lost in a dream, she didn't dare remove the blindfold. It was as if a radiant angel had appeared out of nowhere to give her hope in a world of eternal darkness and offer a road toward true heaven. But little did she know that it was in the arms of the devil incarnate that she now lay. Though perhaps that would never matter. And as Ravmalak protectors felt the loss of their junior and readied to join the fray, Conrad waved his hand, erasing his presence, the corpses and the events from the mind of all onlookers before letting the girl back on her feet. You don't have to answer me now, but know that I have tuition fees. If you choose to follow me, the price is your forbidden physique. I shall take it from you, Conrad declared, and without further ado, spun to head into the auction hall. His ladies followed right afterward. And now that there was a price, as far as the girl was concerned, the situation was much simpler to accept. However, to her, this price was a blessing in disguise, the opportunity to be freed from an eternity of suffering. Without hesitation, she dropped on the ground. and oblivious to the onlookers who seemed anchored in the past, followed her acute senses to kowtow toward Conrad. "Master, your disciple greets you," the girl proclaimed with 3 kowtows, stopping Conrad in his tracks. And though he didn't turn back, his lips curled into a smile. "Name? Don't have any." "Very well, your name is now Cassilia," Conrad proclaimed, and snapped his fingers, causing the absolute negation physique within Cassilia's body to rise in black mist and merge with his body. Although at his level, without the locks it wouldn't be of much use, with his current accumulations, unleashing its true potential was but a matter of time. And seeing the affliction of a lifetime vanish in a finger snap, Cassilia firmly believed that it wasn't a common deity, but the incarnation of heavens while now standing before her. "Rise and follow me. In my house, the incompetent are not valued. Your starting point is low. If you wish to rise on our road, you'll have to put in thrice the work," Conrad declared, and as his words echoed, Cassilia's blindfold dropped onto the ground, revealing the celestial world's radiance to her unprepared eyes. But none of that light could compare with the back of that new master whom she recognized without direction. Shrugging off the blinding radiance, Cassilia rose to follow Conrad, stopping behind him with her head lowered in submission. The group then walked into the auction hall, after which those legions of deities shackled by Conrad's truth laws regained motion. But to them, it was as if nothing had occurred to begin with. Within the auction hall, Dream disciples awaited to lead Conrad into his assigned booth, from which he could observe the auction in its entirety. A procession of top representatives of the hegemonic sects followed suit, each lodged in individual, luxurious booths while the rest stood below. As all guests took their seats, the auction manager, a handsome dream spirit at the true god rank, appeared on the stage to welcome the guests and introduce the first batch of Nagas. "Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Moon Refining Auction. Today, from the lowest maid to the highest elders, all Nagas and moon spirits from the past Moon Refining Palace are up for sale. Did you ever wish to press a cardinal lord's women under your crotch? To ravage their relatives like base and low beasts? Or are you but that heroic soul looking to rescue beauties on hard times? Regardless of origin or motive, this auction is for you," the manager exclaimed, and alongside those words, the auction officially began. Meanwhile, in the infernal realm's southern domain, Tauratha's royal palace received the visit of unexpected guests whose arrival would unleash mighty waves within the incubus primogen's house. 3 cloaked figures stood at the gate of Tauratha's palace. The one at their helm stepped forward, and before the satyr gatekeepers raised their swords, sent a mental message that resounded within their minds and shackled all impetuous moves. "Tell Taurath that his grandchildren have arrived to visit him," Kron ordered, startling the 10 guards protecting the entrance. With their minor god cultivation, if not for his restraint, Kron's words would have blown them into pieces. And realizing that those 3 newcomers were up to no good, the gatekeepers floundered. Throughout the infernal realm, who dares act with such arrogance before His Majesty's palace? Could they be from the central domain? The guards wondered. The central domain was the Overlord's land, home to all archdemons. With archdemons being a naturally overbearing and conceited bunch, the guards immediately linked Kron to the central domain. Without delay, they sent mental messages to the higher-ups, requesting guidance. But little did they expect that before they finished their report, the palace's gates opened wide. "Welcome, children, to my little corner of hell. My servants shall guide you in." Taurath's voice echoed within the minds of Kron, Elia, and Helmet. And as it did, a burst of purple haze dazzled the entrance, revealing 6 mesmerizing ladies that, in tandem, bowed toward the 3. "Welcome, honorable guests. His Majesty commands us to guide you into the main hall. Please," the maids explained, before motioning for the 3 to follow them in. Chapter 502 Dad. "I'm scared. 1,000,000 godjades. Hyde's thrilled voice boomed from within Conrad's booth, causing black lines to stretch the foreheads of the gathered deities. At the start of the auction, all of those gods soared with fighting spirit, ready to flaunt their factions' accumulated wealth and snatch those living Naga treasure who could overnight become their factions' mighty boosts. But when the manager presented the first batch of Naga and Moon Spirit slaves to officially start the auction, apprehension quickly filled many hearts. The first batch comprised the Moon Refining Palace's fighting power beneath godhood, a total of 280,000 sages. Naturally, such a staggering quantity of slaves couldn't fit on one stage. The Naga and Moon Spirit slaves all stood bound in a space treasure from which a rudimentary truth projection showcased the goods in their entirety. The auction's rules were simple. One sage-level slave cost 100,000 divine stones, 10 god jades for a minor god, 100 god jades for a true god, 1,000 for a void god, 10,000 for a nihility god, 100,000 for a high god, 1 million for a cosmic god, 10 million for an ancestral god, and 500 million for a half-step legendary god. The starting price tripled for Chandra's consorts. With one god jade being equal to 1 million divine stones, the first batch's price started at 28,000 god jades, a price the gathered forces were more than able to inflate. Of course, though their quantity was astonishing, none of the gathered forces would break their coffers for a sage-level batch. In the grand scheme of things, they had little value. But little did they expect that from the highest booth, a startling bid of 50,000 god jades would echo. Immediately, those that planned to snatch those sage level at a low price lowered their heads, not daring to risk a pitfall. Thus, Heidi got the first batch. As their initial fear dispersed, those deities inwardly sneered, thinking that the folks in that booth didn't know how to ruin themselves. But when the second batch of 5,000 minor gods followed, and a bid of 100,000 god jades echoed, their hearts teemed with fright. It's fine, it's fine. It must be one of Daksha's spoiled granddaughters. She will soon be out of jades. The Sea Dream Temple's disciples start with an unfair advantage. Half the money spent here falls back in their sex treasury, anyways. Who knows what directives they received from their elders? Perhaps they just wish to trick us into ruining ourselves. Those are reasonable words. We can't fall for their dastardly plan. Wait for the true god batch to make a move. Many prominent elder deities from the various divine and cardinal sects reasoned. With their confidence refueled by the rational words, they straightened their backs, awaiting the next batch with self-satisfied smiles while scoffing at the Sea Dream Temple's stupidity. The 2,500 true gods batch announcement followed with a starting bid of 250,000 god jades. But as those deities readied to shout prices and fight for the top commodities, Hyde's voice again resounded, dropping on them with a bid of 1 million god jades. 1 million. This time, the deities could no longer restrain themselves and rose in outrage. You are going too far. Surya's third son and the Primal Sun sect's third junior lord bellowed with his peak stage cosmic god cultivation base. The average ancestral god's net worth was about 40 million god jades. The poorest had about 5 million, while the wealthiest ancestors could boast 100 million. But none would be so mad as to start a bidding war at 1 million god jades. Only the tacit agreement of a hegemonic sect could spark such a bidding war. The Sea Dream Temple clearly planned to use its position as the host to bully them all. All deities agreed with that train of thought and in tandem spoke in outrage. Your Sea Dream Temple is brazenly oppressing us. Are you not afraid of heaven's wrath? The warden chose you for your impartiality, not to abuse power and cheat your peers. Once we report this matter to the Heaven Warding Temple, do you think you can escape punishment? Damnable Maras, since when did you become so greedy? Do you think you alone can swallow the Moon Refining Palace's resources? Don't let beauty get over your head. If you don't restrain yourselves, the world is your enemy. Right, right, right. Roars of indignation thundered within the auction hall, causing the manager to not know whether he should laugh or cry. To say nothing of those incensed deities, Even he couldn't understand what was going on in that new elder's mind. As the host, it was already shameless for the Sea Dream Temple to get involved in the bidding. But not content of breaching that bit of etiquette, that elder did so in such a brazen manner that all could see he was riling up the various factions. Although the Sea Dream Temple was a cardinal sect, with the losses they recently suffered and their primogen's injuries, among those hegemonic sects, who did they dare offend? Those were times for peace and reconstruction. None wanted war. But that elder, or rather, the girl doing the bidding for him, seemed to scream, "If the world is not chaotic, I shall not rest." And the poor manager didn't know how right he was. As the various factions' deities rose in outrage, little did they know that Hyde's lips curved into a radiant smile. Worse, her dastardly eyes screamed, "This is far from enough." Following the appearance of that out-of-the-blue disciple, it would be a lie to say Heidi didn't feel her supreme position threatened. And seeing her pout, Conrad gave her the bidding rights, thereby making her the various factions' nightmare. Sniff, sniff, sniff. "Dad, I'm scared, help." Sniff, sniff, sniff. A now quivering Heidi sobbed as she cradled in Conrad's arms. And seeing this, Cassilia the newcomer blinked in disbelief while Verena and the Valkyrie acted as if this was but a natural occurrence. Look well and emulate. If you wish to thrive in this house, those are the skills you want to master. Celine advised Cassilia while giving her right shoulder gentle taps. Now, as she stared at the father-daughter pair, Cassilia wondered if she didn't fall in a hoodlum's den. "Oh, who dares startle my princess? Dad will give you justice," Conrad pledged before casting his eyes toward the still-roaring deities. "Impudence! Are you taking my Sea Dream Temple for a joke? If you have money, bid. If you don't, scram. This is an auction, not a charity. Those unable to handle the fight should shove their repugnant heads back in their asses and roll back whence they came." Conrad snarled, and alongside his voice, a silver mirror he'd robbed from Daksha's hands appeared, releasing dazzling magenta hands that swatted all the recalcitrant deities and sent them flying with large blood spurts. Aoarg! The battered deities groaned in pain as they tumbled in disarray. An 8-star god artifact? Surya's third son and some ancestral god elders realized in fright. The auction resumes. This is my first and last warning. Whoever dares misbehave, I shall crush into meat paste. Asterisk humph. Star. Conrad gave a disdainful snort for good measure while patting Hyde's silky hairs. Chapter 503. Don't Mess With Us. Is this a god or a bandit? A slack-jawed Cassilia wondered while her eyes hovered between Conrad and Heidi. In a flash, all her previous reverence toward that incomparably lofty deity Conrad represented vanished, replaced by waves of stupor. But for some reason, she found that new aspect a lot more refreshing. And if before she didn't dare raise her head in Conrad's presence, she could now glance at his eyes. Having spent the majority of her life in darkness, Cassilia's eyes should have rippled with an insatiable curiosity for the world surrounding her. However, as she stared at Conrad's bare-faced look, she couldn't help but feel drawn to his hues. Meanwhile, the various battered deities rose, one after the other with begrudging looks clear on their faces. But with the threat of an 8-star god artifact looming over them, they didn't dare rashly act. The strongest on the scene were but mid-stage ancestral gods. There were better ways to forfeit their lives. Echoing Conrad's command, the manager resumed the auction, and a thrilled Heidi rushed back to pound those deities with her beloved dad's wealth. First lesson. In the cultivation world, righteousness died early. Fists make rules, and might makes right. Therefore, never seek fairness. Be it in good or in evil, the path you wish to thread can only be hammered into reality by an irresistible fist. Conrad told Cassilia in a mental message that made her snap out of her torpor. But as his words spread within her mind, her eyes shone with reluctance. But what if you won't submit to greater might? She wondered. But little did she expect that the thought wouldn't escape Conrad. Then fight and grow. With all the tricks at your disposal, fair or dirty, fight. With an unbreakable will driving you. Challenge destiny and thrive. If you have the will and strive to rise, so long as you don't perish on the road, you shall transcend the fate imposed by destiny. Conrad replied to Caecilia's unspoken question, startling her and causing her eyes to widen in disbelief. But as soon as it came, that disbelief vanished, replaced by a sliver of enlightenment that gleamed within her black eyes. Clasping her hands, Caecilia bowed toward Conrad. "Thank you, master, for your teachings," Caecilia replied. Meanwhile, the bidding war carried on. 10 million, 12 million, 15 million, 16 million. The deities clashed with cash for the opportunity to snatch those 2,500 true god slaves. But as they persisted in low increments, Hyde's voice echoed. 50 million. Elation laced Hyde's words, an elation that seemed to be smacking those deities' ancient faces. But with the previous lesson, they didn't dare misbehave, and following a moment of silence, someone pushed the bid forward. 51 million. Surya's third son's voice thundered with flaring determination. But as they glanced toward him, the nearby deities could see his clenched fists trembling from his suppressed indignation. And who could blame him? Spending more than 50 million on a batch of 2,500 true gods was lunacy. However, if they kept giving way to the Sea Dream Temple, where would their face be? This batch, the Primal Sun sect would snatch. Oh, someone dares challenge me on wealth? Good, very good. 60 million. The leisurely Heidi countered. 61 million. 100 million. 101 million. 150 million. 151 million. With every one of Hyde's bids, the Primal Sun sect's third junior lord added another 1 million. And feeling the frustration now coating her every bid, waves of self-satisfaction filled his chest. Hee, hateful lass, today, don't even think of competing with me. The junior lord inwardly gloated while Hyde's frustration visibly soared. 200 million. 201 million. 250 million. 251 million. 100 billion. Haha, 100. 1 billion. The third junior lord chortled as he uttered the bid. But when the words left his lips and he registered their implications, his entire body quivered and his eyes widened in incomparable terror. To say nothing of him, every single member of the Primal Sun sect on the scene trembled without end. All eyes rose toward the Sea Dream Elder's booth, desperately hoping for another increase in bid. Alas, no sound followed. Please increase the bid. Increase the bid. Increase the bid. Why isn't she increasing the bid? Surya's third son asked himself with warm tears. The intensity of his stare reached such heights that his eyes went bloodshot, while his nails dug into his palms and draw blood. At that time, Hyde's voice echoed. Bwahahaha. 100. 1 billion godjades for 2,500 true god slaves? Not even goddesses? With that money, you might as well train 1 million true gods. What a joke. If I knew you wished to plow god butts that bad, I'd have conceded a long time ago. The Primal Sun sect is indeed wealthy beyond compare. My Sea Dream Temple swears to put this donation to good use. Ha 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 ha. Heidi guffawed, causing all to realize the scheme where it lay. The gathered deities' eyes turned towards Surya's third son, with the Primal Sun sect's deities eyeing him with blank stares. 100. 1 billion. Half the Primal Sun sect's treasury, for 2,500 true gods. I will not live to see the morrow. The third junior lord stammered as his tall body violently spasmed. For the sake of this expedition, Surya only put 50 billion at their disposal. The rest, they'd have to bring back from the headquarters. And indeed, no Primal Sun sect god on the scene doubted that when the news reached him, Surya would eviscerate that son of his. Guga! Help! Help! Someone save! *PUH. Star. The prospect of a life worse than death drove the poor sod into mental collapse, and as he discovered the wonders of epilepsy, he spurted a large mouthful of blood. His spasming body then tumbled onto the ground. Back in the booth, the self-satisfied Heidi turned toward Cassilia, facing her with a radiant smile. "So, junior sister, did you enjoy it?" Heidi inquired in a jovial tone. If before, Cassilia was merely stumped by the lass's shamelessness, she now truly couldn't even describe what just unfolded. Rogue. Too rogue. 3 hours ago, if anyone told her that someone would dare pull such a dastardly stunt on the Primal Sun sect, she would have never believed it. This hoodlum band really dared do anything. How refreshing. But how is that related to me? Cassilia couldn't help but ask. And hearing this, Heidi shook her head. Of course it is related. Having seen how those Primal Sun sect scrubs bullied you, how can I not take revenge? Although you're now an extra competitor, you also belong to our house. Our house's people, none can oppress with impunity, Heidi proclaimed, causing Cassilia to not know whether she should cry or smile. And without anything else to say, she just bowed in thanks. And though they made no comment, Conrad's party unanimously approved. 100. 1 billion once. Twice. Thrice. Congratulations to the Primal Sun sect for snatching this batch of 2,500 true gods at the whooping price of 100. 1 billion. Please pay up front. The auction manager requested with a polite bow, causing the remaining disciples to follow their junior lord and collapse on the ground. Seizing opportunity in chaos, Conrad snuck into those deities' Tao hearts to plant devil seeds. Chapter 504, Snatching All the Goods. Following the debacle, Sea Dream disciples came to carry out the Primal Sun sect's collapsed gods and finalize the trade. The Rabmalax had no other choice but to surrender the 50 billion at their disposal before requesting more from the headquarters. When the news reached Surya, and he realized that good son of his cheated himself out of half their treasury for 2,500 true gods, Surya staggered, struggling to maintain his composure. In his bid to become an over-god, Godjade was of critical importance. To let go of a few billion for valuable resources was something he could accept. But half his treasury for true gods? To say nothing of 2,500. Even if it were 25,000, he still wouldn't accept it. Alas, the deal was set in stone. Challenging the result was tantamount to challenging the warden, a deed he didn't have the ability to survive. At the end of the day, he wasn't the Thonian primogen. Fortunately, he'd already moved against the Sea Dream Temple. When Daksha perished and Kama took control of the sect, he would get it all back plus interests. Swallowing his ire, Surya dispatched the funds, then vanished in secluded cultivation. Meanwhile, within the auction hall, the situation grew tenser. On the scene, only the Primal Sun sect and the Eternal Void Palace had the capital to challenge the Sea Dream Temple on wealth. Having neither treasury nor primogen, the Radiant Light Mountain's best efforts didn't amount to more than 5 billion. How could they fight? Now, thanks to the Primal Sun sect's stupidity, the Sea Dream Temple could count on an extra 50.05 billion. Even if the Eternal Void Palace was willing to go bankrupt, they couldn't compete. And little did they know how right they were. If before, having plundered 2 cardinal sects and primogens' corpses, Conrad already had the means to crush several unharmed cardinal sects in net worth, the Primal Sun sect's generosity ensured he could trample all without disturbances. As for those true gods, they would never reach the sect's headquarters. The auction resumed, with one batch following another. Heidi snatched the Void God batch for 100 million and the Nihility God batch for 1.5 billion. Starting with the High God batch, all sects desperately fought, making the price shoot up to 12 billion. Still, Heidi snatched it. The Cosmic God batch she seized for 29 billion, the 7 Ancestral Gods for 66 billion, and the Half-Step Legendary God for 55 billion. At the end of the auction's first round, Conrad's party had already spent 163.6 billion, half of which would return to the Sea Dream Temple. Originally, the gathered factions and deities believed that after such expenses, even if they would see half that money back, they couldn't afford to snatch all the goddesses. Alas, Chandra's 3,000 consorts all fell into Conrad's grasp for a whopping 262.5 billion, with a total of 426.1 billion, half of which they'd had to submit to the Heaven-Warding Temple. None doubted that the Sea Dream Temple fell into bankruptcy. Perhaps the Primal Sun sect's donation would help them stay afloat, but dark financial days awaited them all. But if at first, that thought made many deities jubilati, when they recalled the legions of godslaves now boosting the Sea Dream Temple's strength, they couldn't help but release helpless sighs. More than 2,700 gods and 3,000 goddesses, all bound by soul rewiring seals. A boost of 300 high deities, 30 cosmic deities, 9 ancestral deities, and 2 half-step legendary deities. With such gains, didn't the Sea Dream Temple just trade its treasury for global hegemony? Some rationalized. Meanwhile, startling news spread outside. On the road back to the Primal Sun sect, a Ravmalak elder rebelled, snatched the space bag containing the 3 realms' most expensive true gods, and vanished from sight. The news sent the Primal Sun sect into chaos. But locked in seclusion, Surya wouldn't hear of it anytime soon. The auction came to an end, and after paying the Heaven-Warding Temple's dues, Conrad seized his gains and left the hall to return to the Sea Dream Temple. There, a commotion awaited. Within the celestial world, news traveled fast, and when the Sea Dream Temple's expenses reached the elders, their eyes widened in fright. The financial elder, in particular, couldn't believe his ears, because better than his peers, he knew the Sea Dream Temple didn't have that kind of funds. In Gajade alone, they only had 190 billion. How could they afford those expenses? Unless they liquidated the entire treasury, that wasn't possible. Alarmed, the 5 Mara elders rushed toward the treasury, only to find their access revoked. Even the financial elder couldn't dive in. What is the meaning of this? Did Rithi revoke even my access? The financial elder wondered while his peers' eyes shone with skepticism, and as if to answer their inquiries, Rithi's voice echoed within their minds. From now on, Rudra holds the post of financial elder. All matters related to the Sea Dream Temple's finances will be handled by him and only him. You may disperse. Rithi declared in a firm, uncompromising tone, and as the yoke of indignation stifled the elders' hearts, little did they know that she was acting in their best interest. The treasury wasn't missing a dime. If those old fools went in and realized that truth, questions would soar. Questions that'd require Conrad's handling. Although he could deal with them without blood loss, a few swats here and there was inevitable. For the sake of their survival, they'd best never set foot into that treasury again. Alas, in the elders' minds, those words held completely different implications. Rithi, you're going too far. Even if you wish to indulge your lover's excesses, you can't do it at the temple's expenses. As the acting temple lord, how can you be this shameless? The now former financial elder snarled in indignation, immediately gathering the support of his peers. The Sea Dream Temple is not a brothel. We can't sell our underpants for you to keep your boy toy happy. When did you become this muddled? Snap out of it. The law enforcement elder followed with the eyes of a bull eager to gore his target. Blessed by Daksha himself in ancient times, those two were the most senior elders with a cultivation base half-step into the legendary god rank. Within the Sea Dream Temple, their words carried enormous weight. If at first, Rithi wished to handle this fairly, when she heard the words lover and boy toy, her mind underwent a 180 degrees turn. Oh, interesting. As I've heard, within hours of becoming an elder, my boy toy used one auction to more than triple our military might, while you old wastes failed to produce a single, helpful policy to revitalize our sect. Now you want to fault the both of us? Very well. The law enforcement elder is relieved of all his duties. I hereby create a high elder position charged to handle both the law and finances. Naturally, Rudra shall hold the post. Dissatisfied? If you dare complain, I dare swat you. What can you do? Rithi proclaimed, taking a page from Conrad's book. And faced with the most despotic display of nepotism and power abuse they'd seen in their innumerable years of life, the elders staggered, not knowing what to do. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.